The patrol car glided through the deserted streets of Havenwood, its tires humming a low, steady tune against the cold asphalt. Midnight had long since wrapped the town in its inky embrace, a blanket of quiet that seemed to amplify the hum of the engine and the soft, rhythmic breaths of shadow nestled in the back. Officer Daniel Danny Thorne gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles a little white, his gaze fixed on the endless stretch of road illuminated by his headlights. Havenwood was a town slowly dying, its once thriving industrial heart now a graveyard of derelict factories and abandoned warehouses. Rust-streaked metal skeletons pierced the sky, stark monuments to a bygone era. Most residents had left years ago, chasing prosperity to greener pastures, leaving behind a resilient, if weary, community. Danny, a relatively young K-9 officer, had chosen Havenwood precisely for its quiet desperation. He believed there was still good to be done here, still lives to touch, even if the grand gestures of policing rarely happened. A perpetual knot of self-doubt tightened in Danny's stomach. A constant companion since his last assignment, he'd been part of a search and rescue team in a neighboring county. A child gone missing in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. They'd searched for days, tirelessly, desperately. But they hadn't found her. The image of the distraught parents, their hopes slowly eroding with each passing hour, was seared into his memory. He'd felt it then, and he felt it now. A crushing sense of failure. A deep-seated fear that he wasn't good enough. That he couldn't make the real difference he so desperately craved. Shadow, his German shepherd partner, was the antithesis of his self-doubt, with fur as dark as his name and eyes that gleamed with an almost human intelligence. Shadow was Danny's anchor. He was seasoned, calm, unwavering. Their bond transcended the typical handler-K-9 relationship. It was a partnership built on trust, countless hours of training, and an unspoken understanding that often spoke louder than words. Shadow was the reason Danny got up every morning, the silent confidant who absorbed his anxieties and mirrored his quiet determination. Tonight's patrol was as routine as any other. The scanner whispered reports of a broken streetlight on Elm Street, a false alarm at the old mill. The air was crisp, carrying the faint, metallic scent of decay from the abandoned factories. Danny drove past rows of darkened houses, their windows like vacant eyes. A few porch lights cast lonely halos against the gloom. The quiet hummed with an almost oppressive weight. He passed the town square, its fountain long since dry, a testament to Havenwood's slow decline. The old clock tower, usually a comforting landmark, stood silent, its hands frozen at some forgotten hour. Everything felt still, stagnant, trapped in time. As they turned onto Blackwood Avenue, a road that wound through the most desolate part of the industrial district, Shadow suddenly shifted in the back. A low, soft whine escaped him, barely audible above the engine. Danny glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting Shadow's alert gaze. The dog's ears were perked, his nose twitching, sniffing the air with an intense focus. "What is it?" "Boy," Danny murmured, his brow furrowing. Shadow wasn't usually so easily disturbed. This area was known for rats, foxes, the occasional stray cat. Nothing that would typically elicit such a strong reaction from a highly trained K-9. Shadow's whine grew more insistent, a soft, persistent sound that spoke of genuine distress. He began to paw at the divider, not aggressively, but with a firm, rhythmic persistence, his powerful body tensing, pulling towards the passenger side of the vehicle. His eyes were wide, fixed on something outside Danny's limited human perception. Danny slowed the patrol car, his gaze sweeping the desolate landscape. On their right stood the colossal, crumbling silhouette of the old Sterling manufacturing plant, a monolithic structure of cracked concrete and broken windows. It was a place where local kids dared each other to explore, a haven for vagrants and a known hotspot for minor vandalism. No lights, no sounds, Just the skeletal remains of a once proud industry. Just the old factory. Buddy, Danny said, trying to reassure Shadow and himself. Nothing in there but rusty machinery and ghosts, but Shadow would not be appeased. He barked once, a short, sharp sound, then let out another urgent whine. His powerful headbutting the divider, pointing directly at the factory's imposing, dark facade. His insistence was palpable, a silent scream that something was profoundly wrong. Danny hesitated. His shift was nearly over. He could write it off as Shadow sensing a stray animal, or perhaps a lingering scent from a past patrol. But a lifetime of working with K9s had taught him one invaluable lesson. Never, ever ignore your partner's instincts. Shadow had an uncanny ability to perceive things beyond the realm of human senses, an intuition that had saved lives and uncovered truth before. He sighed, a cloud of warm breath fogging the interior of the patrol car. "All right, boy," he conceded, the words feeling heavy in the quiet night. "Just a quick look. For old time's sake." He pulled the patrol car to the side of the road, the tires crunching softly on loose gravel. He killed the engine, and the silence that enveloped them was immediate, profound, almost suffocating. The wind whistled through the broken windows of the factory, a mournful, hollow sound that seemed to carry whispers from the past. The air was thick with the scent of damp concrete and decay. Danny grabbed his heavy-duty flashlight and stepped out into the biting chill. The cold bit at his exposed skin, raising goosebumps. He opened Shadow's compartment, and the German Shepherd bounded out, shaking off the residual warmth of the car. His posture immediately alert, poised for action. Shadow immediately lowered his nose to the ground, sniffing the cracked asphalt. Then the overgrown weeds that pushed through the cracks in the factory's foundation. He let out a low, almost imperceptible growl, a rumble of unease deep in his chest. Then, he raised his head, his ears swiveling, triangulating on something. He looked at Danny, then pulled insistently on the leash. Not towards the main, boarded-up entrance, but towards a smaller, crumbling access door on the side of the building. Partially obscured by overgrown ivy and debris, Danny followed, his flashlight beam cutting through the inky blackness, revealing the peeling paint and rusted hinges of the old service entrance. A shiver, unrelated to the cold, traced its way down his spine. This wasn't just a stray animal, this was something else. Something important. The stillness of the midnight hour had been shattered, replaced by a growing sense of foreboding that promised to redefine what was possible and what was truly hidden. In the heart of quiet Havenwood, the air inside the abandoned Sterling manufacturing plant was a thick, stagnant blanket of cold and decay, dust motes, disturbed by Danny's flashlight beam, danced in the musty air, illuminated by the faint, filtered moonlight bleeding through shattered skylights high above, every creak of the old metal, every whisper of wind through broken windows, seemed amplified in the cavernous silence. Shadow, however, moved with an almost ethereal grace, his powerful body low to the ground, his nose working furiously, guiding Danny deeper into the labyrinthine interior. "Easy, boy," Danny murmured, his voice hushed. The sound swallowed by the vast emptiness of the factory floor. The sheer scale of the derelict building was overwhelming. Rows of silent, rusty machinery stretched into the gloom, like sleeping giants, their complex mechanisms frozen in time. Looming overhead were catwalks, their metal grating groaning under the weight of decades of disuse. Broken glass crunched under Danny's boots with every step, a jarring sound that made him wince. Fearing it would betray their presence to whatever Shadow was tracking, Shadow's agitation grew with every yard they covered. His tail, usually a calm, low wag, was now stiff, held straight out behind him. His low growl was almost constant, a vibrating rumble in his chest that Danny felt through the leash. He was pulling with a relentless urgency, tugging Danny away from the main, open factory floor and towards a maze of smaller, darker rooms and corridors. This area, once bustling with assembly lines, now lay in complete disarray. Piles of debris, fallen beams, and rusted equipment forming a treacherous obstacle course. Danny swept his flashlight beam across the oppressive darkness. His heart pounding in his chest, his rational mind screamed at him. This was a fool's errand, a child's cry in this place. It was impossible. He knew this district. It was desolate, abandoned for years. Any child here would be freezing, starving, long since succumbed to the elements. But Shadow's conviction was absolute, an unshakable force that Danny had learned to trust more than his own logic. A sudden, sharp tug on the leash jolted Danny from his thoughts. Shadow had stopped abruptly, his body rigid, head raised, sniffing the air with intense concentration. Then, he let out a low, mournful whine, a sound of profound sadness that tore at Danny's heart. He pushed his nose into a crack in a crumbling brick wall, nudging it insistently. "What is it, buddy?" Danny whispered, his voice tight with growing apprehension. He aimed his flashlight beam at the wall. It was just a wall, covered in grime and graffiti. Nothing. Shadow whined again, then began to dig frantically at the base of the wall with his paws, scattering dust in small chunks of concrete. He was desperate. Danny knelt beside him, running his gloved hand over the cold, rough brick. He felt a faint draft, colder than the surrounding air, seeping from the crack. He leaned closer, straining his ears, trying to pierce the overwhelming silence of the factory, and then he heard it, a whisper of a sound. So faint he almost dismissed it as the wind. A fragile, almost imperceptible sound, easily lost amidst the groaning of the old building. But he focused, his breath held in his chest, and he heard it again. It was a soft, ragged sob. Danny's blood ran cold. It was unmistakably human, and it was coming from inside the wall. His gaze snapped to Shadow, whose eyes, wide and intelligent, were fixed on him, reflecting the same chilling realization. The dog nudged his hand with his wet nose, then whined again, a clear confirmation, a child's cry. In the middle of an abandoned factory, at midnight, it defied all logic. But it was there, and it was real. The memory of the lost child. Lily, from that past search and rescue operation, slammed into Danny with the force of a physical blow. The agony of not finding her. The crushing weight of failure. It fueled a desperate resolve within him now. He would not fail this time. He would not let another child be lost. He quickly scanned the crumbling wall. There was no visible door, no obvious opening. He shone his flashlight into the crack Shadow had indicated. It was too narrow for even Shadow's paw. "Okay, boy, okay," Danny muttered, his voice grim. "We need to find a way in." He pulled at loose bricks, testing the mortar. It was old, brittle. He found a loose section further along the wall, obscured by a fallen beam. He began to frantically clear the debris, his urgency growing with every passing second. The faint sob had turned into a soft, whimpering sound, intermittent but undeniably present. As he worked, a new thought pricked at him. How did a child get here? This wasn't a place for casual exploration. It was too dangerous, too remote. The presence of a child, trapped within the bowels of this decaying leviathan, suggested something far more sinister than a simple mishap. It felt deliberate. He finally pried a large, loose brick from the wall. Behind it, a small, dark opening, barely large enough for him to squeeze through. He peered inside. It was a narrow, unlit passage, choked with dust and cobwebs. The air was colder, heavier, hinting at a long-forgotten section of the factory. "Stay here, Shadow," Danny commanded, looking at his partner. "Guard the entrance. If anyone comes, you let me know." Shadow whined, a sound of protest, his eyes pleading. He wanted to come with Danny, to protect him, to be there for the child. "I need you here." "Boy," Danny insisted, meeting Shadow's gaze. "To protect our way out and to warn me. Trust me." After a moment of tense silence, Shadow reluctantly obeyed, sitting down by the opening, his body coiled, his ears rotating, his eyes fixed on the darkness within. He was a sentinel, vigilant and unwavering. Danny took a deep breath, grabbed his flashlight, and squeezed through the opening. The passage was even tighter than it looked, forcing him to move on his hands and knees. The rough bricks scraping against his uniform. The darkness was absolute, suffocating, broken only by the narrow beam of his flashlight. The air was thick with the scent of stagnant water and mildew. He crawled for what felt like an eternity, the whimpering growing slightly stronger, guiding him like a spectral siren song. The passage eventually opened into a slightly larger, circular chamber. The air here was even colder, almost freezing. The whimpering was clearer now, closer. Danny pushed himself to his feet, sweeping his flashlight beam around the chamber. It was empty, save for a few discarded crates and some old, rusted barrels. The light danced over the concrete floor, the peeling paint on the walls, then came to rest on a small, dark recess in the far wall. The whimpering was definitely coming from there. Danny approached cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. He took a deep breath. Steeling himself for whatever he was about to find, he aimed his flashlight into the recess, and there, curled into a tight ball, shivering violently, was a small figure, a child, a little girl, perhaps no older than 6 or 7, her face buried in her knees, her tiny body trembling uncontrollably. She wore thin, dirty clothes, offering little protection against the biting cold. Danny's breath hitched. Relief, overwhelming and profound, washed over him, momentarily pushing away the cold and the fear. He had found her. "Hey, little one," Danny said, his voice soft, gentle, trying not to startle her. "It's okay, I'm a police officer. My name is Danny. I'm here to help you." The girl slowly lifted her head, her face pale and streaked with dirt and tears. Her eyes, wide and terrified, were a startling blue. She stared at him, then beyond him, into the darkness of the passage he had come from, a look of profound fear tightening her small face. She clutched something to her chest, something small and ragged. Then, a sound. Not from the girl. Another sound, a weak, almost imperceptible cough. And then a tiny, fragile whimper from behind the girl, almost entirely hidden by her small frame. An even smaller figure shifted. Danny aimed his flashlight, his breath catching in his throat. There, nestled against the terrified girl, shivering uncontrollably, was a baby, a tiny, frail boy, perhaps a year or 2 old. His face flushed with fever, his eyes half closed. He was unconscious, barely breathing. Danny stared, stunned. Not one child. 2. And one of them was barely clinging to life. The chilling reality of the situation hit him with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't just a lost child. This was a desperate, harrowing secret, concealed in the heart of Havenwood's forgotten ruins, and what Officer Danny Thorne discovered, hidden in the bleak silence of midnight, stunned him to his core, marking the beginning of a desperate race against time. The chilling reality of the scene in the forgotten chamber hit Danny with the force of a physical blow. Not one child, but 2. A small girl, no older than 6 or 7, huddled protectively over a baby boy who was frail, barely conscious, and clearly suffering from a severe fever. The air in the recess was biting, thick with the smell of damp concrete and fear. "Hey, sweetheart," Danny whispered, his voice trembling slightly despite his efforts to keep it steady. He slowly knelt, careful not to make any sudden movements that might frighten the girl further. His flashlight beam illuminated their small, desperate huddle. The girl's eyes, a startling shade of blue against her grimy face, darted between Danny and the tiny boy she clutched to her chest. She was shivering uncontrollably, her thin clothes offering almost no protection against the pervasive cold. "It's okay," Danny repeated, his voice low and soothing. "I'm a police officer. My name is Danny. I'm here to help you. And him." He gestured gently towards the baby. The girl's lips, chapped and pale, trembled. She tried to speak, but only a dry, rattling gasp escaped her gaze. However, remained fixed on Danny, a profound fear mingling with a glimmer of desperate hope. She clutched the small, ragged object to her chest tighter. It looked like a worn, faded teddy bear. Danny's police training, honed over years, kicked in. First, assess the immediate threat. He scanned the recess, then the circular chamber, but found nothing. No other figures, no weapons, no obvious dangers lurking in the shadows. Just the overwhelming silence of the abandoned factory, punctuated by the faint, raspy breathing of the baby. Next, prioritize. The baby was in critical condition. He needed warmth, medical attention, and quickly. "What's his name?" Danny asked, his voice gentle. "What's his name, little one?" The girl swallowed hard, her eyes still wide, then finally managed to whisper, her voice hoarse and barely audible. "Leo, his name is Leo." "Okay, Maya," Danny said, remembering the internal name he had given her. Maya felt right. Somehow. He knew better than to ask for her real name just yet. "Maya, can I just check on Leo? He looks very sick. I need to get him some help." Maya hesitated, her grip on Leo tightening. Her eyes darted around, as if searching for an escape route. Or perhaps for someone else. Her distrust was palpable. A tangible wall between them. Danny knew he needed to build trust. And fast. He remembered a trick his K-9 instructor had taught him in situations with children. The K-9 often serves as a bridge, a non-threatening presence that can calm fear. He thought of Shadow, waiting patiently outside the passage. "I have a friend outside," Danny said softly, trying to make eye contact with Maya. "He's big and furry, and very gentle. His name is Shadow. He's a dog, a police dog. He helped me find you. Would you like to meet him?" Maya's eyes flickered, a tiny spark of curiosity overriding some of her fear. She looked towards the dark opening of the passage, then back at Danny. A police dog. She had never seen one up close. "He's very kind," Danny continued, pressing his advantage. "He'd love to say hello to you and Leo. He could help keep you warm." The mention of warmth seemed to sway her. She shivered again, a deep, full-bodied tremor. She looked at Leo, then back at Danny, a silent plea for reassurance in her eyes after a tense moment. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "Okay," Danny said, a wave of relief washing over him. "I'll go get him. You stay right here. Okay, I'll be right back." He carefully backed out of the recess, keeping his flashlight beam fixed on them, a silent promise of his return. He crawled back through the narrow passage, his mind racing with adrenaline and a growing sense of dread. The air in the passage felt colder, heavier, the memory of the lost child. Lily was a haunting whisper in his mind. He had to be quick when he finally emerged from the passage, gasping for breath. Shadow was exactly where he had left him, a dark sentinel in the gloom. The German shepherd immediately perked up, his ears swiveling, his nose twitching. He had heard Maya's faint sounds even from this distance. "She's in there, boy," Danny whispered, burying his hand in Shadow's fur. And a baby, a very sick baby, We need to get them out. Shadow let out a soft whine, then nudged Danny's hand, a clear demand to move. Okay, okay, Danny said, releasing his leash. Showtime, buddy. Gentle, we need to make a good impression. Shadow, understanding the command for caution, moved with a surprising softness. He led Danny back to the narrow opening. Danny squeezed through first, then gently coaxed Shadow to follow. The powerful K9 had to contort his body to fit, but he did so without complaint. His focus entirely on the task. They emerged into the circular chamber. Maya? Seeing Shadow. Gasped, her eyes widened, not with renewed fear, but with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Shadow, sensing her unease, lowered his head slightly, his tail giving a soft, slow wag. He approached cautiously, his movements deliberate and calm, then lay down a few feet from the recess, his head resting on his paws. His gaze fixed on Maya and Leo, his breath, warm and steady, misted in the cold air. He was a silent, watchful guardian. Maya slowly reached out a trembling hand, her fingers brushing Shadow's dark fur. The dog remained perfectly still, his gentle presence a calming force. A tiny, almost imperceptible smile touched Maya's lips. She looked at Danny, a hint of trust finally replacing some of the raw terror in her eyes. He's soft, she whispered, her voice still hoarse. He's the best, Danny replied. A wave of relief washing over him. Shadow had bridged the gap. Now he could focus on Leo. He moved closer to Maya, carefully assessing Leo's condition. The baby was dangerously pale, his skin clammy and hot to the touch. His breathing was shallow and ragged, punctuated by weak whimpers. He was definitely running a high fever, possibly suffering from hypothermia on top of it. He needed immediate medical attention. Maya, Danny said, his voice gentle but firm. I need to take Leo. We need to get him to a doctor. Can I pick him up? Maya's eyes instantly filled with fear again. She clutched Leo tighter. No, don't take him. They'll hurt him. Who? Maya, Danny pressed, trying to keep his voice calm. Who will hurt him? We're here to help. I promise. We'll get you both to a safe place. But Maya only shook her head frantically, her eyes darting to the teddy bear she clutched. She seemed to draw comfort from it, her fingers tracing its worn fabric. What is that? Maya? Danny asked, his gaze falling on the teddy bear. He noticed something unusual. It was old, patched, and had a small, almost invisible stitched seam on its back. And something within it felt hard. Not typical stuffing. Maya tightened her grip, pulling the bear closer, as if protecting a precious secret. My mama. She said I have to keep it safe. Always, never let anyone take it. Danny's mind raced. A child, hiding in an abandoned factory, clutching a teddy bear like a precious artifact, refusing to let go, and terrified of them. This wasn't just a lost child. This was a mystery unfolding, a tangled web of fear and secrecy. The small, fragile cry in the midnight had opened a door to a deeper, more sinister reality. He knew he couldn't force her. He needed her cooperation to get Leo the help he desperately needed. He looked at Shadow, who had now slowly risen and approached Maya, nudging her hand with his nose, then gently licking Leo's feverish brow. Maya, surprisingly, didn't flinch. She leaned into Shadow's warmth, her small hand stroking his fur. Shadow then looked at Danny, then back at Leo, a silent plea in his eyes. Help them. Now, Danny made a decision. He had to reassure her. Okay, Maya, I won't take him. But we have to get out of here. It's too cold for Leo. We need to find your mama and get him to a warm place. Will you help me? Maya looked at him, then at Shadow, her gaze lingering on the comforting presence of the K9. She bit her lip, then slowly, reluctantly, gave another tiny nod. Good girl, Danny said, relief washing over him. Can you tell me, why are you here? Who is they? Maya's eyes widened again, filling with the familiar terror. She shook her head, pulling Leo even closer. And for the first time, Danny saw a flash of defiance in her small face. The secret, whatever it was too big, too dangerous for her to reveal here. Not yet. He knew she was trying to protect something, or someone, and that made the situation even more precarious. The faint cry in the midnight had led him not just to lost children, but to a hidden truth. A complex and dangerous secret, waiting to be unraveled in the heart of Havenwood, and what Officer Danny Thorne and his K-9 partner would discover next would stun the whole town. The frigid air of the abandoned factory pressed in on Danny, chilling him to the bone. But it was the silent plea in Maya's eyes in the shallow, rattling breaths of little Leo that truly froze his heart. He knew, with a certainty that transcended logic, that he had to get these children out. Now. Okay, Maya, Danny said softly, his gaze sweeping over the two children. We need to get you both somewhere warm, somewhere safe. Leo needs a doctor. Maya looked at him. Then at Shadow, who lay patiently, his dark eyes fixed on the children. The German shepherd's presence, calm and reassuring, seemed to offer her a fragile anchor in her world of fear. After a moment, she gave another tiny, almost imperceptible nod. The simple act felt like a monumental victory. Good, Danny breathed, a wave of relief washing over him. Can you tell me if there's anyone else here? Anyone who might hurt you? Maya shook her head, a violent shudder passing through her small frame. No, just them. They went away. But they'll come back. Her voice was a terrified whisper. Who are they? Maya. Danny pressed gently, knowing he couldn't push too hard, but needing answers. But Maya clutched her teddy bear tighter, her eyes darting away, the raw fear returning. She refused to meet his gaze. The secret, whatever it was too terrifying to utter. Danny sighed. He understood. Her survival instincts, honed by unimaginable experiences, were telling her to stay silent, to protect whatever vital information she held. He wouldn't push her further. Not now. The priority was getting Leo to safety. He carefully picked up Leo, cradling the tiny boy gently in his arms. Leo was frighteningly light, his skin burning with fever, his limbs limp. Danny felt a familiar pang of guilt and dread coil in his stomach. The memory of Lily, the lost child he couldn't find, flashed vividly in his mind. It had been a sweltering August day, the air thick with humidity and the frantic cries of search party volunteers. Lily, only 5, had wandered from a campsite in the vast Pine Ridge National Forest. Danny, then a rookie K-9 officer, had been assigned to a grid, tirelessly combing the dense undergrowth with his first K-9 partner, a gentle Labrador named Cooper. Day after day, they'd searched, hope slowly fading under the oppressive summer sun. He remembered the desperate faces of Lily's parents at the command post. Their eyes hollow with despair, he had pushed himself to the breaking point, ignoring exhaustion, ignoring the searing heat, driven by a desperate need to find her. But they never did. Lily's disappearance remained an open, agonizing wound in the community, and in Danny's soul. He had blamed himself for weeks, reliving every step, every decision, convinced he had missed something, that he hadn't been good enough. The guilt had haunted him, a silent, corrosive force that fueled his relentless dedication to his work. A desperate attempt to atone for a failure that wasn't entirely his own. That failure, that lingering regret, fueled him now. He would not let Leo become another Lily. He would not fail again. Shadow, Danny commanded, his voice tight with resolve. Lead the way. Safest route, fastest way out. Shadow. Sensing the urgency in Danny's tone, rose immediately. He nudged Maya, then glanced at Danny and Leo, a silent assurance passing between them. He then moved towards the narrow passage. His ears perked, his nose working, leading the way with a newfound intensity. Danny carefully maneuvered Leo through the tight opening, the baby whimpering weakly. Maya, clutching her teddy bear, followed closely, her small body trembling. The journey back through the dark. Decaying corridors of the factory was slow and fraught with peril. The ground was uneven, covered in rubble and broken glass. Danny held Leo close, protecting the fragile child from the sharp edges and debris, his eyes constantly sweeping the shadows, searching for any sign of them. Shadow, however, moved with an almost supernatural precision. He navigated the treacherous terrain with ease, his powerful body brushing aside debris, his paws finding secure footing where Danny saw only danger. He paused at crumbling sections of wall, guiding Danny to safer detours. His unwavering focus was a beacon in the oppressive darkness. As they moved, Maya, despite her fear, managed a few more whispered words, prompted by Danny's gentle questions. Mama, she said if she didn't come back, I had to go to Aunt Carol's and keep Leo safe. And the box. She gestured vaguely to the teddy bear she clutched. The box? Danny asked, his mind latching onto the detail. What box? Maya. But again. Maya fell silent, her eyes darting nervously around, as if unseen listeners lurked in the shadows. She clutched the teddy bear closer, burying her face in its worn fur. The silence was punctuated by the distant, mournful whistle of a train, a stark reminder of the outside world, a world that seemed a million miles away from their desperate journey through this forgotten labyrinth. The chill of the factory, however, still permeated every breath, and Danny felt Leo's small body growing colder in his arms. Despite the baby's raging fever, he needed warmth. Fast, finally, after what felt like an eternity. Shadow stopped. He was at the crumbling service door through which they had entered. A faint sliver of moonlight pierced through a crack in the boarded-up doorway, illuminating the swirling dust within. We're almost there. Maya? Danny whispered, his voice hoarse with exertion and relief. Just through here, and we'll be outside. We'll get warm. He carefully pushed aside the rotting planks and debris blocking the doorway. The cold night air, though biting, felt like a breath of fresh life after the stagnant chill of the factory. He squinted against the dim light, scanning the deserted street. Nothing. No cars, no people. Just the quiet street and the distant, twinkling lights of Havenwood. He emerged first, holding Leo carefully, then reached back for Maya, helping her through the narrow opening. Shadow burst out behind them, shaking off the dust and grime of the factory, immediately taking up a watchful position at Danny's side. Danny quickly moved them to the patrol car, its familiar silhouette a comforting sight in the gloom. He gently placed Leo in the back seat, wrapping him in a spare blanket he kept for emergencies. The baby whimpered, his small body trembling. "Stay with him, Shadow," Danny commanded. And Shadow immediately leaped into the back seat, curling protectively around Leo, his warm fur a welcome comfort against the baby's feverish skin. Maya, seeing Leo finally getting some warmth, seemed to relax slightly. She climbed into the back seat, huddling beside Shadow and Leo, still clutching her teddy bear. Danny quickly got into the driver's seat, starting the engine. The heater blasted to life, sending a stream of warm air through the vehicle. He pulled out his radio, his fingers fumbling slightly with the controls. He needed to get an ambulance here. Now, dispatch. This is Unit 302, Officer Thorne. He radioed, his voice urgent. I have a medical emergency. 2 children located, 1 infant, severe hypothermia, high fever, requesting immediate ambulance to Sterling Manufacturing Plant. Blackwood Avenue entrance. Repeat, Immediate ambulance. The dispatcher's voice crackled over the radio. Calm and professional. Understood. 302, ambulance en route, ETA 10 minutes. Any additional units needed? Danny hesitated. He had found the children. He had solved the immediate crisis. But Maya's terror, her whispered words about them and the secret box, gnawed at him. This wasn't just a simple case of lost children. There was something far more sinister at play. A hidden truth lurking beneath the surface of Havenwood's quiet decay. He knew, with a chilling certainty, that this rescue was only the beginning. The echoes of loss from his past fueled his resolve. He would uncover the truth, whatever it cost, and what Officer Daniel Thorne and his K-9 partner would discover next would truly stun the whole town. The wail of the ambulance siren, growing steadily louder, sliced through the pre-dawn quiet of Havenwood, a beacon of hope after the harrowing hours in the abandoned factory. Danny watched from the driver's seat as the paramedics, their faces grim under the flashing lights, swiftly and professionally tended to Leo. The baby was quickly wrapped in thermal blankets, an oxygen mask gently placed over his small face. Maya, clutching her worn teddy bear, sat wide-eyed beside him, her small hand protectively on Leo's arm. Shadow, ever vigilant, stood a silent guardian beside the ambulance door, his dark eyes fixed on his human family. Officer Thorne, we're transporting the children to Havenwood General. One of the paramedics informed Danny, her voice brisk. The boy's hypothermic and has a significant fever. The girl seems stable but is severely malnourished and traumatized. We'll need a statement at the hospital. Understood, Danny replied, his voice rough with exhaustion. I'll be right behind you. He nodded to Chief Miller, who had just arrived, his face a mixture of concern and grim determination. Chief, it's more than just lost children. There's a deeper story here. I think they've been held against their will. The girl mentioned them and a box her mother told her to protect. Chief Miller's expression hardened. A box? What kind of box will get to the bottom of this? Danny, get yourself to the hospital. Make sure those kids are safe. We'll secure the factory. Nobody touches anything until forensics is done. As the ambulance sped away, its siren fading into the distance, Danny climbed back into his patrol car. Shadow, with a soft whine, jumped into the passenger seat, not his usual compartment, and rested his head on Danny's lap, offering a silent comfort. Danny stroked his fur, the familiar warmth a grounding presence amidst the swirling chaos of his thoughts. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and hushed voices, while Leo was rushed into emergency. Maya, though clearly exhausted, refused to be separated from her teddy bear. A kind social worker, Miss Evans, a woman with gentle eyes and a reassuring demeanor, tried to coax her to let go of it, to no avail. She won't let it go. Officer, Ms. Evans whispered to Danny. She says her mother told her it's important. It's almost like a security blanket for her. Danny remembered Maya's terrified whispers about the box. He knelt beside Maya, who was bundled in a warm blanket, sipping warm broth. Maya, he said gently, that teddy bear. Is there something special inside it, like a box? Maybe Maya's eyes, though still wary, widened slightly. She looked at Miss Evans, then back at Danny. Slowly, hesitantly. She nodded. Mama, she stitched it in, for me to keep safe. From them. Her voice was barely audible. Could you show us? Maya, Danny asked, keeping his voice soft and non-threatening. It might help us find your mama and make sure they can't hurt anyone else. Maya hesitated for a long moment, her small fingers tracing the worn fabric of the bear. She then pointed to a small, almost invisible seam on the bear's back. It was clearly a crude, makeshift stitch. Hastily done. Ms. Evans, with Danny's permission. carefully began to unpick the stitches. As the thread came loose, a small, hard object was revealed, carefully wrapped in a piece of faded cloth. It was a small, ornate wooden box, no larger than Danny's palm. It had a delicate, carved lid, but no lock. Maya's eyes were fixed on the box. She reached out a trembling hand and gently took it from Ms. Evans. She clutched it to her chest, her small body still tense. "What's inside?" Danny asked, his heart pounding with anticipation. He knew this was the key, the hidden truth Maya had been desperately protecting. Maya looked at him, then at Miss Evans. Her fear was still evident, but a flicker of resolve seemed to replace it. Slowly, with a deep breath, she opened the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay two items: a small, leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with neat, handwritten entries, and a tarnished, old-fashioned silver locket. Danny carefully picked up the ledger. The entries were a jumble of dates, numbers, and cryptic codes. Not a typical financial ledger. This looked more like a meticulous record of illicit activities. Perhaps names, locations, transactions. This was far more than he had anticipated. This was evidence, substantial, damning evidence. He then picked up the locket. It was heavy, cool to the touch. He flipped it open. Inside, on one side, was a faded photograph of a beautiful, kind-faced woman smiling brightly. On the other side, two tiny, cherubic faces, Maya and Leo, much younger, smiling innocently. "That's Mama," Maya whispered, her small finger tracing the woman's face in the locket. "She told me. She loved me. And Leo, and she'd come back for us." Danny's gaze lingered on the woman's face in the locket. Her eyes held a warmth that seemed impossible in the harsh reality of their current situation. This was Sarah, their mother, and she was missing. "Maya," Danny said, his voice gentle, "can you tell me about your mama and why she hid this?" He gestured to the ledger. Maya, seeing the photograph of her mother, seemed to draw courage from it. Her voice, though still soft, gained a little strength. She began to speak, her words painting a harrowing picture of a life lived on the fringes, constantly overshadowed by fear. "Mama, she worked for him. He made her," Maya whispered, her eyes wide. "She did bad things. She didn't want to. But he made her. He said if she didn't, he'd hurt me and Leo. He controlled everything. He knows everything that happens in Havenwood." "Who is he, Maya?" Danny asked, his heart pounding. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fit, forming a terrifying image of a ruthless individual controlling the town's shadows. Maya looked at him, then at the locket, then finally met his gaze. Her blue eyes filled with a desperate plea for understanding. "His name is Silas Thorne." The name hit Danny like a physical blow, a sudden, brutal shockwave that reverberated through his entire being. Silas Thorne. The name was a phantom from his own past, a name he had tried to bury deep within his memory, a name synonymous with pain and abandonment. Silas Thorne was his uncle, his mother's estranged brother, the black sheep of their family, a man notorious for his charm, his cunning, and his utter lack of conscience. Silas had vanished from their lives years ago, after a series of shady dealings had alienated him from the family. Danny had always believed he was gone for good, a forgotten shadow, but Silas was here, in Havenwood, and he was the he who had terrorized Maya and Leo, who had forced their mother into a life of crime. He was the mastermind behind the darkness that clung to the town. Danny felt a sickening wave of nausea. His own family, the very man he despised, the man he had believed was out of his life, was now revealed as the antagonist, the architect of this misery, the man who was responsible for Sarah's disappearance, for these children's suffering. "Silas Thorne," Danny repeated, his voice barely a whisper. the name tasting like ash in his mouth. "Are you sure? Maya?" Maya nodded, her small face grim. "He lives in the big house outside of town. He has lots of men. He makes people do what he wants. Mama said he's very bad, and she was going to stop him. That's why she hid the box. She said it was proof. For when she came back, Danny stared at the ledger in his hand, then at the innocent faces in the locket, then back at Maya's terrified eyes. The cryptic entries, the hidden cash. It all made chilling sense now. Sarah, trying to break free, gathering evidence against her own brother. His own uncle, his personal and professional worlds had just collided with devastating force. This was no longer just a police case. It was a deeply personal crusade. He had to find Sarah. He had to bring Silas Thorne to justice, and he had to protect Maya and Leo with everything he had. The hidden path through the factory had led him not just to lost children, but to a shocking truth that would indeed stun the whole town and forever change his own life. The fluorescent hum of the hospital room felt starkly alien after the oppressive silence of the factory. Maya, her small body still trembling from the cold and the revelations, watched as the nurses worked quickly and efficiently, starting an IV drip for Leo. The baby, though still pale and feverish, seemed to breathe a little easier now, his tiny chest rising and falling more regularly. Shadow, ever present, lay calmly by Maya's bed, his head resting on his paws, his dark eyes observing everything with a quiet intensity. His mere presence was a tangible comfort, a silent promise of protection that seemed to ease some of Maya's deep-seated fear. Danny, standing by the doorway, felt a cold knot of fury tightening in his gut. Silas Thorne, his own uncle, the man who had been a shadowy, despised figure from his past, now revealed as the architect of unimaginable cruelty in Havenwood, the man responsible for Sarah's disappearance, for these children's suffering. The weight of this personal connection, combined with his professional duty, pressed down on him with suffocating force. He needed to act. But every move had to be precise, calculated. Silas Thorne was not just a criminal, he was family, a chillingly intelligent and dangerous adversary. Ms. Evans, the social worker, approached Danny, her face etched with concern. "Officer Thorne, we've contacted Child Protective Services. They're arranging for a temporary safe placement for Maya and Leo once he's stable. But Maya, she won't let go of that teddy bear. And she's still terrified of revealing more than the bare minimum." Danny nodded, his gaze fixed on Maya. "She has good reason to be. This isn't a simple case of neglect. Miss Evans, this is a deliberate, organized operation. Her mother, Sarah, was likely forced into it by Silas Thorne. Maya's silence isn't defiance. It's a deep-seated fear for her life and Leo's." He paused, then made a decision. He needed to gain Maya's absolute trust, to peel back the layers of her fear. "Can you give us a moment? Ms. Evans just shadowing me. I think I can reach her." Ms. Evans hesitated, then nodded, her understanding gaze sweeping over Maya and Shadow. "Of course, officer. Take your time. I'll be right outside." She left the room, pulling the door quietly shut behind her. Danny walked to Maya's bedside and sat on the edge of the mattress. Shadow, sensing Danny's intention, shifted closer to Maya, resting his head near her small hand. "Maya," Danny began, his voice low and earnest, "I know you're scared, and you have every right to be. What you've been through, no one should ever have to go through that. But I promise you, I will protect you and Leo, and I will find your mama." Maya's eyes, still wide and wary, met his. You know him," she whispered, her voice barely a breath, her fingers clutching the teddy bear even tighter. The silent question in her eyes was palpable. "Can I trust you? When he's your family?" Danny took a deep breath. This was the moment of truth. He had to be completely honest with her, to build a foundation of trust that even Silas Thorne couldn't shatter. Yes, Maya, he admitted, his voice heavy. Silas Thorne, he's my uncle, my mother's brother. But he is nothing like my mother, or like me. What he does, and it's wrong, and I hate him for it. Maya's eyes widened further, a flicker of surprise, then something akin to recognition. She seemed to be searching his face, looking for any trace of deceit. He abandoned my family years ago. Danny continued, his voice tight with suppressed anger and pain. We thought he was gone, but he came back, and he hurt your mama. And he hurt you and Leo. That makes him my enemy. Maya and I will stop him. I promise you that. He looked at the teddy bear in her hands. That box inside the bear. What did your mama say it was for? Why was it so important? Maya, after a long, silent moment of contemplation, seemed to reach a decision. Her small hand, still trembling, slowly unpicked the crude stitches on the teddy bear's back. She extracted the small wooden box and handed it to Danny. Her eyes, though still fearful, now held a glint of desperate hope. She was placing her trust in him, a fragile, precious thing. Mama said it was proof, Maya whispered, her gaze fixed on the box. Proof he was hurting people, and proof he was hurting the other children. She said she was trying to get away, to tell someone, to stop him. Danny's blood ran cold. Other children. His mind immediately flashed to the vague intelligence reports he'd heard about Silas. Rumors of illicit activities far more sinister than just petty crime. He opened the wooden box. Inside, the leather-bound ledger lay nestled beside the tarnished locket. He picked up the ledger, its pages filled with cryptic entries, dates, names, symbols, what looked like coded transactions. This wasn't just a record of illegal dealings, it was a meticulous account of a criminal empire. And Maya's words about other children painted a terrifying picture. Silas Thorne was involved in something far more heinous than just controlling the town's shadows. She wrote everything down, Maya explained, her voice gaining a surprising strength now that the truth was starting to unravel. Mama was always good at remembering things and writing. She said this was for when she could finally get help, to show everyone what he was really doing. Danny carefully turned the pages of the ledger. He saw names that seemed to be code, locations, dates that stretched back months, even years. And then, he saw it, a series of entries, meticulously documented, referring to deliveries, acquisitions, and transfers of assets, but followed by what appeared to be children's ages. And occasionally, a single, identifying letter. His heart lurched. Other children. Maya's words echoed chillingly in his mind. This wasn't just about stolen goods or drug deals. This was about child trafficking. The realization hit him with a sickening force, a wave of profound horror. Silas Thorne was not just a local criminal. He was a monster, preying on the most vulnerable, exploiting the desperation of Havenwood's struggling families. He looked at Maya, her small, innocent face now etched with a wisdom far beyond her years, a wisdom born of unimaginable trauma. He looked at Leo, so fragile, so vulnerable in the hospital bed. And then he looked at the ledger in his hands, proof of a dark network woven into the very fabric of Havenwood. Maya, Danny said, his voice a low, gravelly whisper, his eyes fixed on the ledger. This is incredibly important. This could help us find your mama and stop Silas, and help all the other children. Maya nodded, her small face grim. Mama said it was the only way. She tried to leave him, but he wouldn't let her. He said he knew where we would go, and he would hurt Leo. The words explained Sarah's desperate plight, her impossible choice between complicity and the safety of her children. It explained why she had vanished, why she hadn't simply left. Silas had held her captive, not with chains, but with the terrifying threat to her children's lives. Danny felt a surge of cold fury, pure and unadulterated. This wasn't just a professional case anymore, it was personal. His uncle, the man who had abandoned his own family, now revealed as the perpetrator of such vile acts against others. He carefully put the ledger and locket back into the wooden box, then gently handed it back to Maya. This is very important. Maya, it's your mama's proof. We need to keep it very safe. Can you trust me to do that? To help you keep it safe? Maya looked at him, then at Shadow, who gave a soft, reassuring whine. After a moment, she slowly, tentatively, nodded, a fragile glimmer of trust in her deep blue eyes. She clutched the box to her chest, her personal shield against the terrifying world. Danny knew he couldn't simply walk out of the hospital and arrest Silas Thorne. He needed backup, a strategic plan, and undeniable proof that would stand up in court. The ledger was a start, but it was coded. He would need to crack it, to fully understand the scope of Silas's depravity, and he needed to find Sarah. He turned to the door, his mind buzzing with the enormity of the task ahead. The silence of midnight had unveiled not just a child's cry, but a meticulously hidden web of betrayal and exploitation, orchestrated by a man he once called family. What Officer Daniel Thorne and his K-9 partner had discovered, hidden in the bleak heart of Havenwood, would indeed stun the whole town, and the fight for justice had only just begun. The sterile quiet of the hospital room felt like a fragile bubble, protecting Maya and Leo from the harsh truths of the outside world. Leo, now resting under the gentle hum of medical equipment, seemed to be slowly recovering, his small chest rising and falling with more regularity. Shadow, a silent, comforting presence, lay curled beside Maya's bed, his head gently resting on her hand, his steady breathing a soothing rhythm in the tense air. Danny stood by the window, gazing out at the first hints of dawn painting the Havenwood skyline in somber grays and pale blues. The town, still asleep, held no hint of the dark secret stirring beneath its surface. His mind, however, was a whirlwind of rage, disbelief, and a burning resolve. Silas Thorne. The name was a bitter taste on his tongue, a ghost from his past now resurrected as a monster. He turned from the window, his gaze falling on Maya. Her small face, no longer contorted by raw terror, now held a solemn, almost weary understanding. The wooden box, containing the ledger and the locket, rested on the bedside table, a tangible link to the terrifying reality they faced. "Maya," Danny said, his voice soft, moving closer to her. "You said your mama was trying to stop him. What exactly was she trying to stop?" Maya's eyes, wide and serious, looked at him. She clutched the faded teddy bear to her chest, finding comfort in its familiar presence. He hurt people. Officer Danny. Not just Mama. Other people. Especially the ones with nowhere to go. The ones who lived in the old places, like the factory. Danny's jaw tightened. He knew exactly whom she meant. Havenwood's homeless population. Marginalized and often invisible. Silas Thorne, preying on the most vulnerable. He made them work for him. Maya continued, her voice barely a whisper. He gave them places to sleep, sometimes food, but then he made them do things they didn't want to do. Mama said he used them, and he took their children. The words struck Danny like a physical blow. Child trafficking. It was even worse than he had feared. The ledger, with its cryptic entries of deliveries and acquisitions, now made a horrifying, undeniable sense. Silas Thorne wasn't just controlling Havenwood's criminal underworld. He was running a modern-day slavery ring, preying on desperate families, stealing their children. Did your mama tell you what kind of work? Danny pressed, his voice taut with suppressed fury. Maya nodded. She said he made them grow things, bad things, and he made them take messages and move boxes, and sometimes he made them take children away, children from other parents who couldn't fight him. Her small voice cracked with the horror of the memory. Mama hated it. She cried a lot. She said she had to make it stop. And the proof in the box? Danny asked, gesturing to the wooden container. What exactly was she documenting? Everything, Maya whispered, her eyes fixed on the box. Names, where the children went, what he made people do. Mama said she was going to give it to someone who could make him stop. But she didn't get to. Her voice trailed off, a fresh wave of tears welling in her eyes. She will, Maya, Danny vowed, his voice fierce. We'll make sure of it. This ledger, it's the key. It's what she wanted the world to know. He carefully picked up the ledger, turning its worn pages again. Now, with Maya's harrowing explanation. The coded entries began to take on a terrifying clarity. Dates and times, followed by initials or numbers. Then a location. Depot 7. Old Mill Warehouse. Riverbend Farm. These weren't just random addresses, they were likely his network of hidden facilities. Safe houses and trafficking points. Maya, Danny asked, a new thought forming. Did your mama ever mention a special word, a code word, or a phrase that she used in her notes? Something to help someone understand the ledger. Maya frowned, thinking hard. Her brow furrowed in concentration. A word, yes, she said. It was for if she couldn't come back. She said, Hope's anchor, she said. Remember Hope's anchor. Maya, it will guide them home. Hope's anchor, Danny murmured. Repeating the phrase, it sounded like a key, a passphrase to unlock the hidden meaning of the ledger's cryptic entries. This was a stroke of genius on Sarah's part, a way to ensure that only a trusted few could decipher her devastating proof. It was also a poignant, desperate message to her children. Hope is the anchor that will bring you home. Just then, Miss Evans re-entered the room, her expression grim. Officer Thorne, I just received word from the chief. They found Sarah Vance. Danny's head snapped up, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. Is she all right? Where is she? Ms. Evans's gaze softened with sadness. She was found near the old bridge, at the edge of the abandoned railway tracks. She's alive. Officer, barely. She's in critical condition. They're rushing her here to Havenwood General now. Relief. So profound it almost buckled Danny's knees, washed over him. Sarah was alive, a miracle, given what she had endured and the ruthlessness of Silas. But critical condition, he knew the fight wasn't over. She needed to recover, to confirm the information in the ledger, to tell her own story. Can I see her? Danny asked, his voice urgent. Not yet, officer. Ms. Evans replied gently. She's being stabilized. They won't let anyone in until she's out of immediate danger. Danny nodded, his jaw tight. He understood. He turned back to Maya. Your mama's here. Maya. She's very sick. But she's here. They're helping her. Maya's eyes, which had widened in terrified anticipation, now welled with tears. Not tears of fear, but of profound, overwhelming relief. She threw her small arms around Shadow's neck, burying her face in his fur, sobbing silently. Shadow, understanding, licked her face gently, a soft, comforting presence. Thank you, Officer Danny, Maya whispered between sobs. Thank you for finding us. Thank you for finding Mama. Danny felt a lump in his throat. This was why he did it. This was the difference he desperately craved to make. The warmth of Maya's small hand on Shadow's fur, her fragile gratitude, was worth every fear, every doubt, every harrowing moment. He knew he couldn't wait for Sarah to recover to act. The ledger was in his hands, and Maya had provided the key, Hope's anchor. He had to decipher it. To present a watertight case against Silas Thorne, he needed to strike hard and fast before Silas could vanish, or worse, retaliate. He looked at the peaceful slumber of Leo, at the quiet strength of Shadow, at the brave, exhausted Maya. They were living proof of Silas Thorne's depravity. And now, Danny had the means to expose him, to unravel the intricate web of his evil. He excused himself from the room, promising Maya he would stay close. He found a quiet corner in the busy emergency waiting room and pulled out his phone. He needed to contact Chief Miller immediately. This wasn't just a local crime anymore. This was something that would require federal intervention. A full-scale operation to dismantle a human trafficking ring. As he dialed, his gaze fell on a discarded newspaper on a nearby chair. The headline screamed about the ongoing missing persons cases in the county, focusing on several young adults and even a few children who had vanished without a trace over the past year. Cases that had baffled law enforcement, dismissed by some as runaways or unfortunate accidents. Danny felt a cold certainty wash over him. This wasn't just Havenwood. This was bigger. Much bigger. Silas Thorne's shadow stretched far beyond the confines of their struggling town. He looked at the ledger in his hand, then at the locket, then at the hospital door behind which Maya and Leo were recovering. The silent guardian, Shadow, had led him to a child's cry in the midnight, and that cry had now unveiled a horrifying truth that would stun the whole town and expose a monstrous criminal enterprise. The fight for justice, with Danny and Shadow at its heart, was about to escalate, becoming a relentless pursuit of a man he now knew as both family and a true predator. The first rays of dawn painted the hospital waiting room in a cold, unforgiving light. Danny, still reeling from Maya's revelations, clutched the wooden box containing the ledger and the locket. Shadow, sensing Danny's turmoil, nudged his hand with his wet nose. A silent offer of support. Danny looked at his loyal partner, grateful for the steady, grounding presence amidst the emotional chaos. He had just ended a tense, hushed phone call with Chief Miller. The chief, initially skeptical of the Silas Thorne connection, had grown grim as Danny relayed the details from Maya and the damning implications of the ledger. Havenwood, a town teetering on the brink, was about to be rocked to its core. We'll need to secure that ledger, Danny, Chief Miller had said, his voice grave. It's critical evidence. Don't let it out of your sight. I'm putting a full task force together. Discreetly, we move on Silas Thorne, and we move hard. But we need to understand that ledger, Hope's anchor. You said, does it unlock everything? Maya believes so? Danny had replied, his gaze fixed on the cryptic pages within the box. Her mother told her it was the key to understanding the proof, to expose Silas. Now, with Maya and Leo safely resting, and Sarah being stabilized by the tireless medical staff, Danny retreated to a quiet, empty consultation room. He carefully placed the wooden box on the table, then sat. Pulling out the ledger, Shadow immediately curled up at his feet, his watchful presence a silent reassurance. He opened the ledger again, his fingers tracing the meticulously handwritten entries. Dates, numbers, coded locations, initials. He remembered Maya's small, determined voice. He made them grow things, bad things, and he made them take messages and move boxes, and sometimes he made them take children away. He flipped to the first page and began to meticulously analyze the entries. The initial pages seemed innocuous enough, dates and what looked like supply orders. But then, as he moved deeper, the codes became more prevalent. He focused on the phrase hope's anchor. It felt like a riddle, a linguistic key. He tried simple ciphers, substitution codes, but nothing made immediate sense. He thought back to Maya's quiet strength, her unwavering belief in her mother's foresight. Sarah, cornered and desperate, had clearly invested everything in this ledger. In this secret proof, she was meticulous, intelligent. The code wouldn't be simple, but it wouldn't be impossible either. It had to be something she, or a trusted confidant, could remember under duress. He looked at the locket. Picking it up, he opened it, gazing at the faded photograph of Sarah's kind face. Then at the younger, innocent faces of Maya and Leo. Hope's anchor, he murmured again. It wasn't just a code, it was a personal message, a testament to a mother's love and her desperate fight for her children. Could hope refer to a person, or a place he remembered Maya mentioning Aunt Carol? Could Carol be hope? He decided to check that possibility later. He then looked at the word anchor. An anchor provides stability, security. It's a heavy object that holds something in place. What if it wasn't a word to decipher the text, but a word that defined a pattern of deciphering? He went back to the cryptic entries. Asset deliveries. Acquisitions. The disturbing implication of child trafficking still echoed in his mind. He focused on a specific entry, 081220XX, Asset Acca 1, B, Depot 7. And below it, a number 3. 3 years old, a child's age. He looked for recurring patterns. What if Hope's anchor didn't decode the words, but rather provided a method of cross-referencing or a numerical offset? He remembered Sarah's quiet determination, her intelligence. She had a background in administration, a keen eye for detail. He began to notice something. Certain numbers, seemingly random, appeared consistently next to specific names or locations. He tried to think of what an anchor would do to a code. It would fix it, stabilize it. What if the anchor was a fixed number? He looked at the locket again, at the date printed on the back of Sarah's photograph, August 12th. 20XX. The very same date as the asset acquisition entry. And below it, etched barely visibly, the initials SV. Sarah Vance. His heart pounded. The date. It was a common thread. The date the picture was taken. What if that date, or a number derived from it, was the anchor August 12th? 0812, 8 and 12, or 20? He tried using 20 as an offset line, for example. If a name was JD and the number next to it was 15, adding 20 to it would make it 35. But what did 35 mean? It still felt too abstract. He leaned back, frustrated, rubbing his temples. Shadow. Sensing his distress, let out a soft whine and nudged his hand. Danny stroked the dog's head, seeking comfort. He closed his eyes, picturing Sarah's face in the locket, her kindness, her determination. Hope's anchor. It will guide them home. Guide them home. Not just the children, but the truth. Then, a sudden thought. What if the anchor referred to the type of entry, rather than a numerical offset and anchor grounds? What if it grounds the hope or despair in the entry? He looked again at the entry for Yawiratu 12 20XX, Asset Acquis, B, Depot 7 3. B and 3. The letter B and the number 3. What could they signify? He thought about the town. Havenwood, its decay, its hidden places, the abandoned factories, the homeless encampments. He remembered Maya's words. He hurt people, especially the ones with nowhere to go. What if the anchor wasn't a numerical key, but a categorical key? What if Hope's anchor meant that the true meaning of the coded entries was tied to the condition of the assets or deliveries? He looked at the ledger entries more closely. Some entries had AC, acquisition. Others transfer, delivery. Some had letters A, B, C, and then numbers next to them. He tried to correlate the letters with the conditions Maya described. What if A meant adult? C meant child, and B? What could B mean? He thought of the vulnerable population. The desperate, broke beggar? He tried the combination for Hope's anchor, SH for homeless, A for abandoned. It seemed too tenuous. He put the ledger down, his mind swirling. He needed a fresh perspective. He stood up, pacing the small room. Shadow watched him, his eyes unwavering. Then, his gaze fell on a diagram drawn in the margins of one of the ledger pages. It was small, almost unnoticeable. A series of interconnected circles and lines. It looked like a map or a network diagram. And at the center of it, a symbol, a stylized knot. Danny remembered a detail from his criminal profiling courses. Organized crime syndicates often used internal symbols, a kind of branding or a way to distinguish their particular operations. The knot. What did it signify? Unity entanglement. He looked at the numerical entries again. Some were small, single digits. Others were larger, 2 or 3 digits. Could they be coordinates or quantities? He went back to Hope's anchor. He tried to separate the words hope and anchor. Hope as in a source of hope, a desperate plea. Anchor as in what grounds it. What makes it real? What if Hope's anchor wasn't a cipher for the text, but a philosophical key to understanding Silas Thorne's modus operandi? What if it meant that for every hope, Silas offered shelter, food, promises? He demanded an anchor of control, a hostage, a debt that could never be repaid, and that the numbers and letters in the ledger documented the magnitude of that control. The lives he had stolen. He reread an entry, 10:05:20XX. Delaxy M, Riverbend Farm, 18. M and 18. A young adult. An adult male. Maybe. 18 years old. Delivery. What was being delivered? People children. He picked up the locket again. Staring at Sarah's face, she was trying to fight him. She was documenting his crimes. And she gave Maya Hope's anchor as the key to unravel it. He closed his eyes. Concentrating. Hope's anchor. It had to be simple enough for Maya to remember, but complex enough to evade Silas. Then, a sudden, chilling thought. What if Hope's anchor wasn't just a phrase, but a mnemonic device, a way to remember a system of decoding? He remembered a childhood game. I spy with my little eye. Something beginning with H. What if hope referred to the first initial of the victim's name, or the code for their vulnerability of G? Homeless, hungry, and anchor referred to the type of transaction or location. He looked at the B in the 08-12 entry. Asset ACAES, B, Depot, 7-3. If B was a category, what kind of category was it? He thought of the desperate, broken families. Begging? No, it was simpler than that. More devastating. He looked at the number 3 again. 3 years old. A child. And the letter B. He remembered news reports from a few months ago. A family had vanished from a local homeless encampment. A mother and 2 children. The mother's name was Brenda, and her youngest child was 3 years old. Brenda, B, 3. His heart froze. Hope's anchor. Hope as in the crushing of it. Anchor as in the ties that bind and exploit. The first letter of the victim's first name, followed by their age, and then the location of their acquisition or delivery. It was a horrifying yet brilliant system. Sarah was documenting specific individuals, their names, their ages, and where they were taken. He looked back at the entry, Joe 12 20XX, Asset ACAS, B. Depot 7, 3. Brenda, 3 years old, acquired at Depot 7. And what about M. Riverbend Farm, 18. Martha, 18 years old, delivered to Riverbend Farm. The code was cracked. The ledger was a meticulously documented list of Silas Thorne's victims. A chilling, undeniable record of his human trafficking operation. Danny felt a wave of cold fury. This was it. This was the proof. He stood up, the ledger clutched tightly in his hand. Shadow rose with him, sensing the shift in his partner's demeanor. "Chief Miller," Danny muttered, his voice grim and resolute. "You're going to want to see this, and the whole town. The whole town is about to be stunned." He knew the dangers ahead. Silas Thorne was cunning, ruthless, and deeply entrenched. But now, Danny had the key, and with Shadow by his side, he was ready to unravel the entire, horrifying web of betrayal that had haunted Havenwood for far too long. The fight for justice, fueled by a child's cry in the midnight, was about to begin in earnest. The revelation of the deciphered ledger burned in Danny's mind, a horrifying blueprint of Silas Thorne's depravity. He quickly relayed his findings to Chief Miller, the gravity of the situation echoing in the chief's shocked silence on the other end of the line. The coded entries, once baffling, now laid bare a chilling record of human trafficking, meticulously documented by Sarah Vance in her desperate bid for justice. This is beyond anything we imagined. Danny. Chief Miller's voice, usually calm and measured, was strained. Child Protective Services is already working with us on Maya and Leo, but this is a federal matter. We'll need to involve the FBI, the state police. It's a full-scale operation now, a deep dive into Silas Thorne's entire organization. He won't be easy to catch. "Chief," Danny replied, his gaze sweeping over the sleeping figures of Maya and Leo. "He's cunning. He controls this town. He probably has eyes and ears everywhere, which is why we move discreetly. And we move fast." Miller countered, "I'm assembling a specialized task force. You'll be central to it." "Danny, you have the ledger, the knowledge of the factory, and most importantly, the trust of the children and Shadow. He's proven indispensable." Danny felt a grim satisfaction. This was it. The chance to finally confront the darkness that had haunted Havenwood and his own family for far too long. He knew the path ahead would be fraught with danger, but with the truth in his hands and Shadow by his side, he felt a steely resolve. Back at the precinct, the atmosphere was charged. Danny and Shadow were whisked into a makeshift command center, where a small, elite team of detectives, cybersecurity experts, and a liaison from Child Protective Services waited. The air crackled with anticipation and a shared sense of urgency. Danny carefully laid out the ledger, explaining the Hope's Anchor decryption method. The cybersecurity expert, a young woman named Agent Riley, no relation, but a curious coincidence that made Danny smile faintly, worked quickly, cross-referencing names and dates with existing missing persons reports. The results were chilling. Missing children from Havenwood and even neighboring towns, whose cases had gone cold, now appeared in Silas's meticulous records, their ages and circumstances aligning with Maya's harrowing testimony. "This is a goldmine, Officer Thorne," Agent Riley murmured, her face pale as she scrolled through her findings. "These are direct links, locations, dates of acquisition, even a code for their destination. He was systematic, a true predator." Danny's gaze fell on a particular entry, Joe 6 1820XX, Asset Accessory L, Old Mill Warehouse 7. A 7-year-old named Liam, acquired from the Old Mill Warehouse. Liam's disappearance had been a local tragedy 2 years ago, dismissed as a runaway by many, but a nagging mystery to the police. Now, the ledger confirmed the darkest fears. "We need to find Sarah Vance, Danny stated, looking at Chief Miller. She's the key witness, and she's still critical. She can corroborate everything in here, and potentially give us even more details. She's under heavy guard at the hospital, Miller assured him. No one's getting to her, and we've just received word that Leo is stable, though he'll need long-term care for malnourishment and lingering respiratory issues. Maya is with him, resting. The focus then shifted to the immediate challenge: how to move on Silas Thorne without tipping him off. He was too entrenched, too well connected. A direct assault on his rumored compound, a sprawling estate on the outskirts of Havenwood, would be a bloodbath. We need to draw him out, Danny suggested. Recalling Maya's words about Silas's arrogance and his obsession with control, he won't leave Havenwood unless he thinks something absolutely critical is at stake. Something he needs to control personally. Like the ledger, Agent Riley interjected, her eyes glinting. He doesn't know you have it. He probably thinks Sarah destroyed it, or that it's lost, if he knew it existed, and that it could expose him. He'd be desperate to get his hands on it. Chief Miller nodded slowly. A trap. We use the ledger as bait. But where and how do we ensure the safety of our officers and the community? Danny thought of Havenwood's neglected infrastructure, its forgotten corners, the abandoned factory district, with its labyrinthine corridors and hidden passages. Had served as Maya and Leo's desperate refuge, but it could also serve as a strategic location for a sting operation, the Sterling manufacturing plant. Danny proposed. It's vast, isolated, full of hiding spots. He won't expect us to use it. It's a place he thought he controlled. We set up surveillance, we secure the perimeter, and we lure him there. And the bait, Miller asked. Danny looked at Agent Riley. We leak a rumor, a controlled, anonymous tip to one of his known contacts. Something about Sarah Vance leaving behind a package that details his operation. A package that's been recovered and is being moved through the old factory for safekeeping before it goes to federal authorities. A package of highly sensitive information that could expose everything, Agent Riley concluded, a cunning smile touching her lips. He'll send his men, of course, Yummy, but he'll also come himself. He won't trust anyone else with something that crucial, and that's when we move. Danny finished, his voice cold and resolute. We secure the factory, we ambush his men, and we take Silas Thorne down personally. The plan was audacious, fraught with immense risk. Silas Thorne was a dangerous man, capable of ruthless retaliation, but it was their best chance to dismantle his entire network, to rescue any other victims, and to ensure he faced the full weight of justice. Over the next 2 days, the task force worked tirelessly, operating under the cloak of extreme secrecy. Havenwood remained oblivious to the storm brewing beneath its quiet surface. Danny and Shadow were constantly briefed, their movements precise and calculated. Shadow's extraordinary senses would be crucial, detecting Silas's men before they could gain the upper hand. Meanwhile, Sarah Vance, though still unconscious, was slowly showing signs of recovery. Her survival was nothing short of a miracle, a testament to her own resilience and the quick actions of Danny and Shadow. Her testimony, when she was finally able to provide it, would be the final, irrefutable nail in Silas's coffin on the third night, as Havenwood once again settled into the hushed grip of midnight. The trap was set. The Sterling manufacturing plant was a hive of silent activity. Officers in tactical gear moved like phantoms through the cavernous factory, setting up surveillance points, tripwires, and strategic positions. Shadow, his senses on high alert, patrolled the perimeter with Danny, his low growls and subtle shifts in posture indicating any approaching presence. Danny felt the familiar knot of anxiety in his stomach. But this time, it was mixed with a powerful surge of determination. He thought of Maya's brave, terrified whispers, of Leo's fragile breath, of Sarah's desperate fight for her children. He thought of the other missing children, their faces now hauntingly present in the deciphered ledger. "He's coming, boy," Danny whispered to Shadow, burying his hand in the canine's fur. "He has to." Hours crawled by in agonizing silence. The wind whistled through the broken windows, making the old factory groan and creak like a phantom ship. Every shadow seemed to hold a lurking threat. Then, Shadow stiffened. His ears perked, his nose twitching. He let out a low, almost imperceptible growl, deep in his chest. His gaze was fixed on a distant, overgrown entrance to the factory, an area almost impossible to see in the darkness. "Movement," Danny whispered into his comms. "Southeast entrance, K9 indicates multiple subjects." Chief Miller's voice crackled back, calm and authoritative. "Understood, Thorne. Hold your position. Let them come to you." A few tense minutes later, faint, rhythmic footsteps echoed through the vast, empty space. Not the crunch of heavy boots, but softer, stealthier steps. The sound of hushed whispers, barely audible. Then, through the gloom, shadowy figures began to materialize. 5 men, moving with a chilling efficiency. Their faces obscured by balaclavas. Each carried a long firearm. They were Silas Thorne's enforcers, his ruthless pawns. They moved slowly, cautiously, their eyes scanning the dark, expecting a simple handover. Perhaps a small, easily intimidated police detail. They were walking directly into the meticulously laid trap. Danny's heart hammered in his chest. He clutched his pistol, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. Shadow, a dark, silent silhouette beside him, was poised, his muscles tensed, ready to spring into action. The leading figure, taller than the others, his silhouette unmistakable even in the gloom, stepped into a shaft of moonlight filtering through a broken skylight. He wasn't wearing a balaclava. His face, sharp and arrogant, was illuminated for a terrifying moment. Silas Thorne. He had come, the mastermind himself. Drawn by the irresistible lure of the ledger, the incriminating proof of his monstrous enterprise, he believed he was in control, that he was walking into a simple recovery, but Silas Thorne was about to learn that in Havenwood, even in the darkest corners, there were forces at play he couldn't control. Forces like a devoted K9 partner, a haunted officer's unwavering resolve, and the unbreakable spirit of brave children. What was about to unfold would not only stun the whole town, but finally bring justice to its hidden shadows. The air in the abandoned factory hung heavy, thick with the scent of dust and decay, and the electric tension of a predator walking into a meticulously laid trap. Silas Thorne, his face illuminated by a stray beam of moonlight, moved with an arrogant confidence. Completely unaware of the net tightening around him, his 5 enforcers fanned out, their suppressed firearms adding to the chilling silence of their advance. Danny, hidden behind a towering stack of rusty crates, with Shadow pressed silently beside him, felt his heart pound against his ribs. This was the moment, the culmination of weeks of dread, years of unspoken familial betrayal, and the harrowing cries of 2 innocent children. He tightened his grip on his pistol, his finger hovering over the trigger. "Chief, they're in position." Danny whispered into his comms. "Silas is leading. They're heading for the old assembly line." Chief Miller's voice crackled back, calm and authoritative. "Understood, Thorne. Hold for my signal. Do not engage until given the word. We want Thorne alive." The seconds stretched into an eternity. Danny watched through a narrow gap in the crates as Silas and his men moved deeper into the factory, their footsteps echoing faintly on the concrete floor. They moved with a practiced stealth, clearly accustomed to operating in the shadows. They passed within feet of Danny's hiding spot, their presence a suffocating weight. Shadow, despite his powerful instincts urging him to act, remained perfectly still, a testament to his rigorous training and deep trust in Danny. Silas stopped near a massive, dormant crane, its metal arm reaching into the darkness like a skeletal limb. He pulled out a small, high-powered flashlight and swept its beam across the rusted machinery, clearly searching for something. "All right, boys." Silas's voice, surprisingly calm despite the tension, cut through the quiet. "The intel says the package is here. Sarah always was a sentimental fool. Thought she could hide something from me." A sneer twisted his lips. "Find it, and make sure the little detective, wherever he is, doesn't interfere." Danny felt a surge of cold fury. Silas knew. He knew Danny was here. It was a taunt, a psychological game. But Danny wouldn't bite. He would stick to the plan. Suddenly, Shadow stiffened. A low, almost imperceptible growl rumbled deep in his chest. His ears perked. Not towards Silas and his men, but towards a different section of the factory. Deeper within the labyrinth, a section Danny hadn't focused on. "What is it?" Boy Danny thought, trying to understand Shadow's sudden shift in attention. Shadow nudged Danny's hand, then whined softly, pulling subtly towards a dark, unexplored corridor that branched off from the main assembly line area. His intensity was palpable, a silent alarm bell ringing in Danny's mind. It was a different kind of urgency than before. Not necessarily a threat, but a profound discovery. Danny hesitated. The plan was to wait for Miller's signal, to spring the trap on Silas. But Shadow's instincts were rarely wrong, and that specific whine, that persistent pull, meant something crucial. He looked at Silas and his men, still sweeping the assembly line with their flashlights. Focused on the package, they were momentarily distracted. "Chief," Danny whispered into his comms, a new urgency in his voice. Shadow is indicating something else, a new development. Deep in the west sector, "I think there's more to this than just the ledger." There was a moment of silence on the other end. "Thorne, stick to the plan." Miller's voice came back, firm. "We can't risk tipping him off." "Respectfully." "Chief, I can't ignore this," Danny insisted. His gaze locked with Shadow's intelligent eyes. "His red is too strong. This is personal. He found the children. He found Sarah. He knows." He knew he was risking everything, going off script. But his faith in Shadow was absolute, and a gut feeling, born from years of instinct, screamed at him that Silas had hidden more than just a ledger. "I'm going in," Danny stated, ignoring the chief's immediate, frustrated response on the comms. He pulled away from the crates, Shadow moving silently beside him, melting into the shadows of the corridor. He moved quickly, silently, his flashlight beam a narrow tunnel in the oppressive darkness. The corridor was even more dilapidated than the rest of the factory, its floor uneven, littered with forgotten machinery parts and collapsed sections of roofing. The air grew colder, damper, carrying a faint, metallic tang. Shadow led him through a series of twisting turns, deeper into the forgotten heart of the factory. The K-9 was relentless, his pace unwavering, his nose pressed to the ground, sniffing out an invisible trail that only he could follow. Danny could hear the faint, muffled sounds of Silas's men in the distance. Still searching for the decoy ledger, they were safe for now, but time was ticking. Suddenly, Shadow stopped. He let out a soft whine, then began to paw at a particularly rough section of the wall. It was covered in layers of grime and old, peeling posters. But beneath it, Danny noticed something, a faint line, almost imperceptible, indicating a hidden door. Danny ran his gloved hand over the wall. The metal was cold, rusted, almost flush with the brickwork. A cleverly concealed door. What could be behind it? More evidence or something far more chilling? He tried to find a latch, a handle, anything. He ran his hand over every inch of the hidden door, his fingers searching. Nothing. It seemed hermetically sealed, Shadow, sensing his frustration, let out a short, sharp bark, then nudged a small, seemingly insignificant lever on a rusted pipe running alongside the wall. Danny looked at it. It was tiny, almost hidden beneath decades of grime. He pushed the lever with a low, mechanical groan. A section of the wall slowly, agonizingly, began to slide inward, revealing a dark, cavernous space beyond. A rush of stale, cold air, tinged with a faint, disturbing odor, washed over him. Danny raised his flashlight, its beam piercing the profound darkness within. The space was vast, much larger than he had anticipated. It was an underground chamber, meticulously maintained. Despite the decay of the factory above, concrete walls, industrial lighting though currently off, and a single heavy steel door at the far end. But what truly stunned him was the sight in the center of the chamber. Rows upon rows of large, metal cages, dog kennels, and inside them, cowering in the dim light, were dozens of dogs, various breeds, all looking malnourished, terrified, and some bearing the clear, gruesome marks of abuse. These were fighting dogs, illegally bred, illegally trained. And then he saw them. Among the terrified dogs, in smaller, isolated cages, were figures. Small, fragile figures. Children. Not just a few, but at least a dozen. Ranging from toddlers to preteens. Some huddled in blankets, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes wide with fear. Others were crying silently, their tiny bodies trembling. They were being held captive, like animals, in this hidden, underground dungeon. Underground. Danny felt a wave of nausea, so powerful it almost buckled his knees. His blood ran cold. This was the deeper truth Maya had hinted at. This was Silas Thorne's true horror. Not just trafficking, but holding them here. In this secret, forgotten corner of Havenwood. Like property, Shadow let out a low, mournful whine. A sound of profound anguish. He pulled at his leash, desperately wanting to reach the trapped animals. The trapped children, his canine instincts, trained to protect and rescue, were screaming in protest. Danny fought to control the rising tide of pure, unadulterated rage. His vision swam for a moment. The images of the tiny, terrified faces seared into his mind. He thought of Liam, the 7-year-old whose disappearance had haunted Havenwood. He looked at the faces in the cages, searching, praying. And then he saw him. A small boy, his face smudged with dirt, his eyes wide, clutching a faded toy car. It was Liam. Unmistakably Liam. "Chief?" Danny whispered into his comms, his voice trembling with fury and disbelief. "Forget the ledger. Forget the decoy. I found them. All of them. Children. Dozens of them. They're here, in an underground vault, and fighting dogs. We need to move, now. Code red. I repeat, code red. Code red. I repeat." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then Chief Miller's voice, sharp with urgency. "Thorne, confirm your location. What the hell are you talking about? Children? Underneath the Sterling manufacturing plant?" Danny rattled off the coordinates, his eyes fixed on the rows of terrified faces. "Hidden vault. He's holding them here. Chief, he's holding the missing children, and he's using the dogs for fighting. This is a human trafficking and animal cruelty operation on a scale we never imagined." "Thorne, do not engage," Chief Miller commanded, his voice strained. "We're moving in. Get back. Danny, wait for backup." But Danny couldn't wait. He looked at the steel door at the far end of the vault. Clearly an exit. He looked at the trembling children, the abused dogs. He looked at Shadow, who was now barking, a sharp, urgent sound, demanding action. He heard the distant shouts of Silas and his men, their footsteps growing louder as they realized the decoy was a ruse. As they finally located the hidden entrance, they were coming for him. Danny knew he had to act. He pulled out his pistol, his hands steady despite the fury raging within him. This wasn't just about arresting Silas Thorne anymore. This was about rescuing every single innocent life trapped in this dark, hidden world, and what Officer Daniel Thorne and his K-9 partner would do next. To save these forgotten souls would truly stun the whole town and reverberate far beyond Havenwood's quiet borders. The chilling discovery of the imprisoned children and the abused fighting dogs in Silas Thorne's hidden vault ignited a primal roar within Danny. His initial rage at his uncle's betrayal now morphed into a cold, determined fury. He couldn't wait for backup. Every second counted for the fragile lives cowering in those cages. "Chief, they're coming for me," Danny barked into his comms, his voice strained with urgency. "I'm going to attempt a breach. Tell the task force to move now. Direct assault, I'll secure the children's exit." He knew he was risking a direct insubordination. But the lives of those innocent souls outweighed any protocol. A frantic, frustrated yell from Chief Miller crackled back. "Thorne, don't be a hero. Fall back. Wait for—" The transmission cut out, lost amidst the growing sounds of approaching footsteps and muffled shouts. Silas's men were close. Very close. Danny wasted no time. He turned to the hidden door, the large, rusted slab of metal that sealed the vault's entrance. He knew Silas would have it secured from the inside once his men entered. He had to act before they could lock it down. "Shadow guard," Danny commanded, pointing at the hidden entrance to the vault. Shadow immediately moved to the opening, his powerful body low to the ground, a menacing growl rumbling in his chest. His dark eyes, gleaming with fierce loyalty, were fixed on the approaching shadows in the factory above. Danny then sprinted towards the rows of cages, his heart aching at the sight of the terrified faces. He had to disable the lighting to plunge the vault into darkness, creating chaos and buying precious time. He scanned the ceiling, locating the main electrical panel. It was a rusty box, high on the wall. He leaped onto a stack of old, wobbly barrels, pulling himself up, his fingers scrambling for the latch just as he reached it. The first of Silas's men burst through the hidden entrance. A burly figure, rifle raised, his face a mask of surprise and then a snarl of recognition. "Thorne, there he is!" The thug yelled, his voice echoing in the vast vault. Shadow, a blur of dark fur, launched himself at the man, not with an attack bite, but a powerful body check that sent the thug sprawling backward, his rifle clattering to the concrete floor. Shadow immediately clamped down on the man's arm, preventing him from reaching his weapon, his growls echoing menacingly. More figures flooded into the vault. 2 more armed men, followed by the imposing figure of Silas Thorne himself. His face contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. "Danny, you fool!" Silas roared, his voice venomous. "You'll regret this. Get the dog." Danny ignored him. He ripped open the electrical panel, sparks flying. He blindly pulled at wires, tearing fuses, plunging the entire vault into pitch blackness. A collective gasp of fear and surprise erupted from the trapped children, followed by panicked shouts from Silas's men. Chaos erupted. Flashlights clicked on, their beams dancing wildly in the gloom, creating disorienting shafts of light. The terrified whimpers of the children mingled with the frustrated shouts of the thugs. "Find him! Find the lights!" Silas screamed, his voice now laced with desperation. Danny, using the cover of darkness and the brief moments of disorientation, dropped from the barrels. He knew the layout of the vault from his brief assessment. He needed to get to the main exit, the heavy steel door at the far end. He heard the sounds of a struggle near the entrance. Shadow battling valiantly, his barks echoing through the darkness. He knew Shadow could hold them for a few crucial seconds. "Kids, stay calm." "We're getting you out," Danny yelled, his voice cutting through the panic, hoping to reassure the trapped children. He began to sprint, navigating the rows of cages, His hand outstretched, trying to find a latch, a release. The individual cages were secured with heavy, industrial-grade locks. He didn't have a key. "Danny, don't touch my property." Silas's voice, surprisingly close, snarled from the darkness. A flashlight beam suddenly cut through the gloom, momentarily blinding Danny. He ducked, rolling behind a row of cages. A shot rang out, muffled by a suppressor, impacting the metal bars of a cage with a sickening clang. The dogs inside whimpered, terrified. He heard the heavy footsteps of Silas's men closing in. He was running out of time. He couldn't open every cage. He needed a way to get the children to the main exit. Then an idea. The steel door. It was heavy, but it might have an emergency release or a mechanism that could be forced open. It was their only hope for a mass escape. He reached the heavy steel door. Its cold, unyielding surface mocking him. He ran his hands over it frantically, searching for any weakness. No visible handle, no obvious push bar. It was designed to be secure. "Danny, I have the ledger." "It's all here." Maya's voice, surprisingly strong, cut through the darkness. She had somehow moved from her original hiding spot, her small voice echoing from the back of the vault. She was trying to draw attention away from him, to help. "Maya, stay down," Danny roared, his heart lurching. She was putting herself in danger. Silas, distracted by Maya's voice, roared, "Get her! She has the package." Footsteps pounded closer, moving towards Maya's position. Danny knew he had to act. He saw a small, emergency panel on the steel door. High up, barely noticeable. It had a tiny red light, now extinguished. A lockout switch or an alarm. He smashed his fist against the panel, grunting with effort. Nothing. He tried again, harder, his knuckles scraping against the rusted metal. Still nothing. Then, from the darkness behind him, a dark blur. It wasn't one of Silas's thugs. It was Max, one of Alara's heroic German shepherds. He had followed Danny's trail, somehow navigating the treacherous factory and bypassing Silas's men. Max let out a low bark, then nudged Danny's hand with his wet nose. He then reared up, his powerful body pressing against the steel door. He pushed his nose into a small, almost invisible crack near the emergency panel, then began to push, his powerful muscles straining. Danny understood. It wasn't a smash, it was a push. A specific pressure point or a release mechanism. Max, with his keen senses and strength, had located it. "Push. Boy, push," Danny urged, putting his own weight against Max. Joining the K9's incredible effort, with a loud metallic clang and a groan of rusted hinges, a section of the steel door unexpectedly slid inward, revealing a narrow, dark escape tunnel beyond. Not a grand exit, but a way out. "He's opening the back," a thug yelled, his voice now filled with a desperate urgency. Silas Thorne roared in frustration. "Stop him! Don't let them escape!" Danny didn't hesitate. He turned to the children, his voice booming through the vault. "Kids this way, follow me now, Shadow. Keep them off my back." Shadow, hearing Danny's command, intensified his struggle, a furious, protective snarl erupting from him as he fought off the two thugs attempting to overwhelm him. He was buying them precious seconds. The children, seeing the light from the open tunnel and hearing Danny's urgent commands, instinctively reacted. The older ones, with a courage born of desperation, began to crawl from their cages, pushing the smaller ones ahead of them, toward the narrow opening. Liam, his small face streaked with tears and dirt, looked at Danny, then at the tunnel, and scrambled towards it. Danny, with Max, stood at the opening, ushering the children through. He saw Maya, her face pale, guiding Leo, who was still barely conscious, towards the tunnel, just as the last child was about to squeeze through. A figure lunged from the darkness. Silas Thorne. He was faster than Danny anticipated, his face contorted in a mask of pure murderous rage. He clutched a heavy pipe, raised to strike. "You won't take them!" Silas screamed, his eyes blazing with a terrifying madness. "They're mine, my property!" Danny reacted instinctively. He pushed the last child through the opening, then turned to face Silas. Pulling his pistol, he fired a warning shot, aiming for the ground near Silas's feet. Silas didn't flinch. He swung the pipe, a vicious arc aimed at Danny's head. Before the pipe could connect, a blur of dark fur shot past Danny. It was Shadow, having finally broken free from the struggling thugs at the front of the vault. He launched himself at Silas, not with a bite, but a powerful, perfectly aimed body check that sent Silas Thorne sprawling backward, his head cracking against a metal crate with a sickening thud. The pipe clattered to the floor. Silas lay still for a moment, dazed, then groaned, attempting to push himself up. Shadow stood over him, a low, menacing growl rumbling in his chest. His eyes fixed on the man who had caused so much suffering. Just then, the main doors of the Sterling manufacturing plant burst open above them, flooding the factory with blinding tactical lights. "Police, freeze!" Chief Miller's voice boomed, amplified by a megaphone. The sirens, finally close, screamed through the night. The task force had arrived. Danny looked from the unconscious Silas to the open tunnel, where the last of the children were being guided by Max to safety. He looked at Shadow, his loyal partner, who had once again proven his unparalleled courage and intelligence. He had fulfilled his promise. He had found them. All of them. And what Officer Daniel Thorne and his K-9 partner did next, in the darkest hour of Havenwood, would indeed stun the whole town, and finally bring the terrifying shadows of Silas Thorne's empire crashing down. Justice was here. The Sterling manufacturing plant, once a silent testament to Havenwood's decay, now echoed with the shouts of officers. The urgent commands of Chief Miller and the triumphant barks of Shadow. Tactical lights flooded the cavernous space, revealing the horrifying truth of Silas Thorne's operation. The liberated children, disoriented but safe, were quickly moved out of the hidden vault and into the waiting arms of Child Protective Services and paramedics. Among them, Liam, the 7-year-old missing for 2 years, stared wide-eyed at the sudden light, clutching his toy car, his small face streaked with tears of relief. Danny, his chest heaving with exertion, stood over the dazed figure of Silas Thorne, who was now being secured by multiple officers. Silas's eyes, filled with a chilling mixture of rage and disbelief, glared at Danny. "You'll pay for this, Danny," he hissed, his voice raspy. "You have no idea what you've just unleashed." "Oh, I think I do," Danny retorted, his voice cold and unwavering. "And so will the whole town. This is over. Silas." Shadow, his dark fur dusted with concrete dust, stood protectively by Danny's side, occasionally letting out a low growl towards the subdued Silas. His powerful body, still vibrating with adrenaline, was a testament to his heroic efforts. He had taken on multiple armed men, disrupted their assault, and ultimately brought down the mastermind himself. As officers swept through the factory, securing the remaining enforcers and documenting the extensive evidence of the dogfighting ring, a critical mission remained: the retrieval of Sarah Vance's hidden evidence. The ledger, now decoded thanks to Maya's bravery and Sarah's foresight, was the ultimate weapon against Silas Thorne's empire, but it was still at the hospital, in Ms. Evans's possession, protected by its unassuming disguise, Chief Miller, his face grim, approached Danny. "Incredible work, Danny, all of it. We've got them. But we need to move fast on the evidence. Silas might have contingencies, other ways to destroy proof. We need that ledger secured by federal agents ASAP." Danny nodded. "It's with Ms. Evans at the hospital. Chief in a small wooden box, inside a teddy bear." Maya gave me the key phrase, Hope's Anchor. It details his trafficking operation. Names, dates, locations, types of victims. A teddy bear, Miller repeated, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. That's one way to hide it. He pulled out his comms. I'm sending a patrol unit to the hospital to escort Ms. Ian Evans and the evidence directly to the federal courthouse. You'll go with them. Danny, you're the primary witness, and you understand the code. Danny felt a surge of professional satisfaction. This was it. The final piece of the puzzle. The evidence that would shatter Silas Thorne's grip on Havenwood within minutes. Danny and Shadow were in a fresh patrol car, racing towards Havenwood General Hospital. The sirens wailed, cutting through the waking town, alerting everyone to the significant police presence. The townspeople, emerging from their homes, stood on their porches, watching with wide, bewildered eyes, wondering what on earth had transpired in their quiet, struggling community. The news of the factory raid, the rescued children, and the capture of Silas Thorne would soon stun them all. At the hospital, they met Ms. Evans, who, though exhausted, was resolute. She held the small wooden box, now clearly labeled as evidence. The children are safe, Officer Thorne. She reported. Leo's condition is improving. Maya is resting. She's incredibly brave. She is, Danny agreed, a wave of protectiveness washing over him. And so is her mother. Is Sarah stable enough to talk? She's out of critical condition, but still weak. Mrs. Evans replied, The doctors say she was severely malnourished and suffered exposure, but she's a fighter. She'll be all right. She'll be relieved to hear about her children. Danny took the wooden box from Miss Evans. The weight of it felt immense, not just physically, but symbolically. It held the truth. The raw, painful truth that Silas had tried to bury. They were about to leave the hospital. A marked police cruiser waiting outside. When Danny's police radio crackled to life, it wasn't dispatch. It was a frantic, urgent voice, distorted by static. Unit 302, Officer Thorne. This is Officer Ramirez. We have a breach hospital main entrance. Multiple armed suspects, they're trying to get to Sarah Vance's room. Danny's blood ran cold. What? He spun around, his hand instinctively going to his sidearm. They're heavily armed. Ramirez's voice was strained. They're shooting, get out of here. Thorne, they're coming for the witness. Silas Thorne, even from behind bars. His reach extended. He had a contingency, a failsafe. He hadn't given up on silencing Sarah or destroying the evidence. Miss Evans, get to safety, Danny yelled, pushing her behind a nearby reception desk. Shadow to the rooms protect Sarah Vance. Shadow, hearing the urgency and the keyword, immediately bolted down the corridor, a blur of dark fur. Towards Sarah's room. His powerful barks echoed through the hospital, a rallying cry. Danny drew his pistol, his heart pounding. The hospital, usually a place of quiet healing, was now a potential war zone. He heard the unmistakable sound of gunfire, muffled but distinct, coming from the main lobby. He ran towards the sound, his senses on high alert. The main lobby was chaos. Panicked staff and visitors screamed, scattering for cover. Two burly men, their faces obscured by ski masks, were systematically pushing their way through the lobby, firing suppressed weapons at the ceiling, driving people to the floor. They were clearing a path, heading straight for the patient rooms. Police, drop your weapons, Danny yelled, his voice booming through the lobby. He took cover behind a large, decorative plant, aiming his pistol at the assailants. The two men spun around, their weapons leveling at Danny. He fired 2 quick shots, aiming for their torsos, but they were wearing body armor. The bullets impacted with dull thuds. The men barely flinched. They returned fire, forcing Danny to duck lower. He was outgunned, outmaneuvered. These weren't petty thugs. These were professional killers, clearly sent by Silas to silence his sister and destroy any remaining evidence. Just as one of the assailants moved to flank Danny, A ferocious snarl ripped through the air. Shadow, having bypassed the lobby, burst through a side corridor, launching himself at the man's gun arm. The thug cried out in pain and surprise as Shadow's powerful jaws clamped down, forcing him to drop his weapon. The other assailant turned his weapon on Shadow. But before he could fire, Danny leaped from cover, firing a precise shot that grazed the man's arm, making him cry out and stumble. "You really want to do this?" Danny yelled, his voice laced with righteous fury. "There are children in this hospital? Innocent people, back off." The two remaining thugs, their faces grim, now saw the sheer tenacity of Danny and the relentless ferocity of Shadow. They knew they were in a bad situation. They exchanged a quick glance, then, wisely, turned and sprinted towards the main entrance. Trying to make an escape, Danny didn't pursue. His priority was Sarah. He rushed towards the corridor leading to her room, Shadow at his heels. He saw the police patrol unit, finally arriving, their sirens blaring, their officers pouring into the lobby. Apprehending the thug Shadow had subdued, he reached Sarah's room. The door was ajar. He burst in, pistol raised. Sarah lay in her bed, weak but awake, her eyes wide with fear. Beside her, on a small chair, sat Mrs. Evans, a terrified but defiant look on her face. "Are you all right, Sarah?" Danny asked, rushing to her side. Sarah nodded weakly. "Yes, they didn't get in, Shadow. He came so fast. He barked and growled. He scared them away before they even reached the door." Danny looked at Shadow, who was now panting softly, his tail giving a low, proud wag. He had fulfilled his duty, his silent guardian role. He had protected the witness. Just then, Chief Miller rushed into the room, his face grim. "Danny, what the hell happened? We heard shots." "Are you all right, Sarah?" We're fine." "Chief?" Danny replied, holstering his weapon. Silas sent his cleanup crew. They came for Sarah, but Shadow deterred them, and the other unit got them outside. Chief Miller looked at Sarah, then at the wooden box clutched in Danny's hand. They came for her. They wanted to silence her. "That ledger, it's more powerful than we thought." "It is," Danny confirmed, his voice firm. "And now, we take it directly to the courthouse, and we bring Silas Thorne's empire crashing down." He looked at Sarah. Her eyes, though still weary, held a newfound peace. She had entrusted her secret, her proof, to the right people. And now, justice was finally within reach. The town would be stunned. The dark truth would be unveiled. But from the ashes of Havenwood's hidden shame, a new beginning was about to emerge, forged by the courage of a desperate mother, the bravery of her children, and the unwavering loyalty of an officer and his K-9 partner, who had followed a child's cry in the midnight and stumbled upon a truth that would change everything. The hospital's sterile corridors. Moments ago, a battleground, now buzzed with the controlled urgency of law enforcement. The two remaining assailants, apprehended by the arriving patrol unit, were swiftly secured, the immediate threat neutralized. Danny's focus returned to the task at hand, ensuring Sarah Vance's safety and delivering the crucial ledger to federal custody. He walked quickly beside Chief Miller, the wooden box with the ledger clutched tightly in his hand. Shadow, his powerful body still vibrating with the adrenaline of the confrontation, walked proudly at his heel. They were heading for the main entrance, where an unmarked federal vehicle was already waiting, its engine idling softly. As they approached the entrance, a formidable figure stepped out of the vehicle. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with a stern, no-nonsense demeanor. Special Agent David Reed, the FBI liaison Danny had spoken with earlier. Reed's gaze swept over Danny, then to the wooden box, then finally rested on Shadow. A flicker of professional appreciation in his sharp eyes. "Officer Thorne," Agent Reed said, his voice deep and authoritative. "I understand you have something for me, and a rather incredible story to go with it." "Agent Reed," Danny replied, extending the wooden box. This is everything Sarah Vance's ledger. Deciphered. It details Silas Thorne's human trafficking operation. Children. Agent? He was holding dozens of them, along with fighting dogs. In a hidden vault beneath the Sterling manufacturing plant? We just rescued them all. Agent Reed took the box, his expression grim as he opened the lid and peered at the ledger within. His eyes narrowed as he quickly scanned the cryptic entries. Children and fighting dogs, he murmured, his voice tight with controlled anger. This is far worse than our intelligence suggested. Much worse. He looked at Danny, a rare spark of admiration in his usually impassive eyes. You and your K-9 partner. You just blew open a federal case of immense proportions. Officer Thorne, this will bring down more than just Thorne's local operation. We believe he has connections outside of Havenwood, perhaps even internationally, Danny added, recalling Alara Vance's earlier assessment of Volkov's reach. He was working with a larger syndicate, possibly dealing in illegal dog breeding and fighting, as well as human trafficking. A man named Victor Volkov? Agent Reed's head snapped up. Volkov the Ghost. He's been on our radar for years. A phantom. You have proof of a connection to Volkov. Not concrete proof from the ledger itself, but strong anecdotal evidence from another victim we recently rescued who confirmed Volkov's involvement in similar operations. Danny explained. Careful with his words. He knew the case of Alara Vance and the K-9 SOS was still in its early stages of investigation in a neighboring jurisdiction. But the overlap was undeniable. Agent Reed's jaw tightened. If that's true, then this is a game changer. A truly coordinated effort against multiple, interconnected criminal enterprises. He looked at Danny with renewed respect. You and your dog have done an extraordinary service, officer, as Danny handed over the ledger. The weight of the past few days seemed to lift, replaced by a profound sense of accomplishment. The evidence was safe. The children were rescued. Silas Thorne was captured. And now, the full power of federal law enforcement would be unleashed. Suddenly, a commotion erupted from inside the hospital. Shouts, rapid footsteps, and then a familiar, furious voice, distorted by rage. You can't hold me here. I demand to speak to my lawyer. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Silas Thorne. He had somehow managed to overpower his escorts within the hospital, likely using his cunning and manipulative charm, always playing the victim. He burst through a side door, handcuffed but fighting, two officers struggling to restrain him. His eyes, wild with fury, immediately locked onto Danny, then to Agent Reed, holding the wooden box. That's my property. That's family information, Silas screamed, his voice raw with desperation. You have no right. It's privileged. Your privilege just ended, Silas, Danny said, his voice cold. That ledger exposes every single one of your crimes. Silas, seeing the box, seeing the faces of the officers, realized his desperate situation. He made a sudden, violent lunge, not towards the box, but towards Agent Reed's face, a desperate attempt to create a distraction, to somehow gain an advantage. He snarled, his eyes blazing with murderous intent, before Agent Reed or the other officers could react. A blur of dark fur shot forward. Shadow. He had been watching, his K-9 instincts perfectly attuned to the shift in Silas's demeanor. To the sudden surge of aggression, Shadow launched himself, not with a full attack, but a powerful, perfectly timed body check that slammed into Silas's chest, knocking the already struggling man off his feet. Silas roared in pain and frustration as he crashed to the sterile hospital floor, his head hitting the polished tiles with a sickening thud. He lay still for a moment. Dazed and defeated, Shadow stood over him, a low, guttural growl rumbling in his chest. His dark eyes fixed on the man who had caused so much suffering. It wasn't just a police dog performing a duty. It was a loyal companion protecting his partner, a silent guardian bringing a monster to its knees. The officers quickly moved in, pinning Silas down, securing him with additional restraints. This time, he didn't fight. The spirit seemed to have gone out of him, defeated not by human force alone, but by the relentless, unwavering loyalty of a K9. Agent Reed looked at Shadow, then at Danny, a look of profound respect on his face. "Remarkable," he murmured. "Truly remarkable." He then spoke into his comms. "All units, clear. Suspect fully apprehended. Evidence secured, situation code 4. Chief Miller approached Danny, a hand on his shoulder. "You all right, son?" "That was too close." "I'm fine, Chief," Danny replied, his gaze still fixed on the defeated figure of Silas Thorne. "It's finally over." He watched as Silas was escorted away, his head bowed, his defiance finally broken. The weight of years, of hidden truths, of personal betrayal, seemed to lift from Danny's shoulders. The ghost of Lily, the lost child from his past, finally seemed to recede, replaced by the faces of Maya and Leo, safe and sound. A short while later, Danny stood outside the hospital, the wooden box now safely in Agent Reed's hands. The federal agents were leaving, taking the evidence, and the beginning of a massive case. With them, Officer Thorne, Agent Reed said, extending a hand to Danny. "You showed incredible courage, resourcefulness, and dedication. And your K9, he's truly exceptional. Thank you, Havenwood, and a lot of other places. Owe you both a debt of gratitude." Danny shook his hand firmly. "I just did my job. Agent, with a lot of help from Shadow and Sarah Vance and her children." He watched as the federal vehicle, its lights now off, merged into the morning traffic, carrying the proof that would dismantle Silas Thorne's empire. The quiet town of Havenwood was about to wake up to a truth that would stun them to their core. He looked down at Shadow, who was sitting patiently beside him, gazing up at him with those intelligent, knowing eyes. He knelt, burying his fingers in Shadow's fur, feeling the powerful, steady beat of the K9's heart. "You did it, boy," Danny whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You did it all. You heard their cry. You guided me. You protected them. You brought him down." Shadow licked Danny's face. A soft, warm gesture of affection. Their bond, forged in the crucible of fear and desperation, now burned brighter than ever. They were more than just partners. They were a unit, a family, a force for justice against the hidden darkness. The town would be stunned by the revelations, the hidden suffering, the years of quiet desperation would finally come to light. But with the truth exposed and justice delivered, Havenwood could finally begin to heal. And Danny, no longer haunted by past failures, could look forward, knowing that with Shadow by his side, he could face any challenge, overcome any obstacle, and continue to make a profound difference. One quiet midnight patrol at a time. The powerful story of an officer and his K9 partner who heard a child's cry in midnight. And what they did next would forever echo through the town, a testament to bravery, loyalty, and the unwavering pursuit of justice. The morning after the raid broke over Havenwood like a shockwave, news vans, their satellite dishes extended like antennae, swarmed the Sterling manufacturing plant. Reporters, their voices hushed with a mixture of horror and awe, delivered live reports from outside the police tape, describing the grim discovery of a human trafficking operation and a dogfighting ring. The entire town was stunned. Whispers and rumors, long dismissed as urban legends, were now horrifying truths, laid bare for all to see. At the precinct, the atmosphere was a mix of exhaustion and triumph. Officers, detectives, and federal agents worked tirelessly, processing evidence, interviewing the rescued children, and building a watertight case against Silas Thorne and his network? The ledger, with its chillingly precise details, proved to be the linchpin, leading to rapid arrests of Silas's key enforcers and the identification of more victims across the region. Danny, though bone-tired, felt a profound sense of purpose. He sat in Chief Miller's office, giving his official statement, relaying every harrowing detail from the moment Shadow had first indicated the child's cry to the terrifying confrontation in the hidden vault. Shadow lay quietly at his feet, his presence a silent testimony to the incredible events. Your testimony and Shadow's actions are extraordinary. Danny, Chief Miller said, his voice laced with pride. Agent Reed is already calling this one of the most significant human trafficking busts in years. Havenwood, it's going to take a long time to heal from this, but you pulled the poison out. It wasn't just me. Chief, Danny replied, his gaze firm. It was Maya, her courage to speak, her mother's foresight to document everything, and Shadow. None of this would have happened without him. He then received the news he had been desperately waiting for. Sarah Vance, though still weak, was conscious and stable. She had given a preliminary statement to federal agents, her words confirming every horrific detail in the ledger, painting a vivid picture of Silas Thorne's manipulation, threats, and utter depravity. She corroborated Maya's account, explaining how Silas had trapped her, forcing her complicity by threatening her children, and how she had painstakingly gathered the evidence, knowing it was her only way out. Later that afternoon, Danny was finally permitted to see Sarah. He brought Shadow with him. The hospital room, now under heavy police guard, was quiet. Sarah, pale but resolute, lay in bed, an IV still in her arm. Her eyes, though weary, held a newfound peace. Sarah, Danny said softly, stepping into the room. I'm Officer Thorne. Danny, I'm the one who found Maya and Leo. Sarah's eyes welled with tears. Thank you, officer. Thank you for saving my children. Thank you for finding me. Her voice was a fragile whisper. It was Shadow, Danny said, gesturing to his K9 partner. He heard Leo's cry. He led me to them. Shadow, sensing the emotional weight of the moment, approached the bed cautiously. Sarah, despite her weakness, reached out a trembling hand and gently stroked his fur. A good boy, she murmured, a faint smile touching her lips. A very good boy. Danny then spoke about Maya, her bravery, how she had clutched the teddy bear, how she had protected the ledger, and how she had bravely revealed the secret of Hope's anchor. Sarah listened, tears silently streaming down her face, a mixture of anguish for what her children had endured, and immense pride in Maya's strength. She's so brave, Sarah whispered. My little girl, she saved us all. She understood. She did. Danny agreed. And she led us to the truth. Silas Thorne is in custody. Sarah, he's not going to hurt anyone ever again. His operation is being dismantled as we speak. A profound sigh of relief escaped Sarah's lips. The terror that had etched itself onto her face for so long finally seemed to recede, replaced by a glimmer of hope. Thank you, she said again, her voice stronger now. You brought us justice. You brought my children back. The news of the children's rescue and Silas Thorne's capture exploded across the national media. Havenwood, once a forgotten industrial town, was now the epicenter of a major federal investigation. The story of Officer Danny Thorne and his K9 partner, Shadow, who had heard a child's cry in midnight and uncovered a monstrous human trafficking ring, captured the nation's heart. Maya and Leo, after days of care, were deemed stable enough to be released into protective custody. The reunion with Sarah, though still fragile due to her recovery, was intensely emotional, a moment of profound relief and quiet joy. The broken family, shattered by Silas's cruelty, was slowly, painstakingly, beginning to mend. As the days passed, Danny found himself besieged by interview requests, commendations, and heartfelt thanks from Havenwood's citizens. He always remained humble, deflecting praise to Shadow and to Sarah and her children, but the internal shift in him was undeniable. The ghost of Lily, the child he couldn't find, finally began to recede, replaced by the vivid, triumphant images of Maya and Leo, safe in their mother's arms. He had fulfilled his desperate need to make a difference, to right a terrible wrong. The legal proceedings against Silas Thorne were swift and decisive. With Sarah Vance's powerful testimony, the meticulously documented ledger, and the overwhelming evidence from the factory vault, Silas had no defense. He tried to claim insanity, coercion, anything to evade justice. But his claims crumbled under the weight of the undeniable proof. In a packed courtroom, weeks later, the verdict was delivered. Guilty on all counts: kidnapping, human trafficking, animal cruelty, racketeering, conspiracy. The judge delivered a scathing indictment, detailing Silas Thorne's heinous crimes against the most vulnerable members of society. Silas, stripped of his arrogance, his power, and his freedom, was sentenced to multiple life terms without the possibility of parole. His criminal empire, built on the suffering of others, was utterly destroyed. Justice, a slow-burning flame in the shadows of Havenwood, had finally erupted into an inferno, consuming the darkness he had so meticulously cultivated. As the courtroom emptied, Danny stood quietly with Chief Miller. The town, once paralyzed by fear, could finally breathe a collective sigh of relief. The wound would heal, slowly, painfully. But it would heal. You know, Danny, Chief Miller said, placing a hand on his shoulder. This town owes you everything. You brought peace back. You brought justice. Danny looked at Shadow, who was sitting patiently beside him, his dark eyes gazing up at him. He knelt, burying his hand in Shadow's thick fur. We just followed a cry for help, Chief, and we refused to give up. The future for Havenwood was uncertain, but now it held hope. The community, once fragmented by fear and economic decline, began to rally, supporting the rescued victims, establishing new initiatives to prevent such horrors from ever happening again. The story of the child's cry in the midnight and what Officer Thorne and his K-9 partner did next would forever be etched into the town's history, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between a man and his loyal K-9. The trial of Silas Thorne became a pivotal moment for Havenwood. The town, long defined by its lingering decay and unspoken fears, found a new, painful, but ultimately unifying identity in the wake of the revelations. The local news, once focused on minor crimes and economic woes, now highlighted the stories of the rescued children, the healing families, and the courageous acts of those who brought Silas to justice. Maya and Leo, after weeks of extensive care and therapy, were reunited with their mother, Sarah, in a touching, private ceremony that brought tears to the eyes of everyone present. Sarah, though still recovering physically, was vibrant with a newfound determination. She knew her fight wasn't over. She had to rebuild her life and help her children heal. But she also had a burning desire to ensure no other family in Havenwood suffered as hers had, inspired by her ordeal and Danny's unwavering support. Sarah established Havenwood Hope, a community outreach program dedicated to providing resources, shelter, and support for vulnerable families, aiming to prevent them from falling prey to predators like Silas. She worked closely with Ms. Evans and other social workers, creating a safe haven where people could seek help without fear. The rescued dogs from the hidden vault, many bearing the scars of abuse, were slowly rehabilitated. Local veterinarians and animal welfare organizations volunteered their time and resources, providing medical care and gentle rehabilitation. Many of these brave animals found loving, forever homes, their stories of resilience echoing through the community. The discovery of Silas's dogfighting ring sparked a renewed commitment to animal welfare laws across the state, ensuring harsher penalties for such barbaric crimes. As for Officer Daniel Thorne, his life was irrevocably changed. The quiet, self-doubting K-9 officer became a local hero, his name synonymous with courage and compassion. He was featured in national news stories, documentaries, and even a segment on a popular morning show, always with Shadow by his side. Danny, always humble, consistently redirected the praise, emphasizing the collective effort and, most importantly, the profound role of his K-9 partner. Shadow's the real hero, Danny would often say in interviews, his hand resting on Shadow's head. He heard the cry when no one else could. He led the way through the darkness. He protected those children. He brought down a monster. I just followed his lead. The ghost of Lily, the lost child from his past, finally found peace within Danny's heart. He still remembered her, but the crushing weight of failure had lifted, replaced by the profound satisfaction of knowing he had ultimately made a difference. He had saved lives, brought justice, and exposed a terrifying truth. Danny's bond with Shadow deepened into something almost spiritual. Their shared experience in the dark factory, facing unspeakable evil, had forged an unbreakable connection. Shadow wasn't just his partner, he was his confidant, his anchor, his furry shadow that guided him through life's complexities. One sunny Saturday morning, months after the raid, Havenwood held a Community Appreciation Day at the newly revitalized town square. The clock tower, once frozen in time, now proudly displayed the correct hour, its chimes ringing out melodiously. The fountain, restored to its former glory, gurgled cheerfully, its waters shimmering in the sunlight. Maya, now a vibrant, smiling girl, stood on a makeshift stage with Sarah and Leo, her eyes shining with joy. She helped Sarah cut a ribbon, officially opening Havenwood Hope. The community cheered, a sound filled with gratitude and newfound optimism. Danny and Shadow stood to the side, watching the festivities. Chief Miller approached them, a proud smile on his face. "You know, Danny," Chief Miller said, his gaze sweeping over the bustling town square. "A few months ago, this town felt like it was dying. Now there's a new spirit here, a new hope. All because of what you and Shadow did." Danny looked at his loyal partner, who nudged his hand, a soft, content whine escaping him. "It's what we do, Chief. We serve, we protect, and sometimes we listen to the quietest cries in the darkest places." He bent down, burying his fingers in Shadow's thick fur. "You really stunned the whole town, didn't you, boy?" Shadow responded with a happy bark, then nudged Danny's hand, as if urging him towards the next adventure, the next challenge. The afternoon wore on, filled with laughter, music, and a palpable sense of community healing. Children played freely in the park, their innocence a stark contrast to the darkness that had once enveloped Havenwood. The residents, once fearful and isolated, now walked with a newfound sense of purpose, united by their shared ordeal and their collective triumph. As the sun began to set, casting long, golden shadows across the revitalized town square, Danny and Shadow walked a quiet perimeter. They passed the old clock tower, its chimes now a comforting sound. They saw Sarah, surrounded by supporters, her face radiant with hope. They saw Maya and Leo, laughing as they chased pigeons, their childhood restored, Danny knew that Havenwood's journey was far from over. Healing would be a long process. But the foundation had been laid, and at its heart was the story of an officer and his canine partner who, on a quiet midnight patrol, heard a child's cry. What they did next, following an instinct, confronting betrayal, and unveiling a horrifying truth, had not only stunned the whole town but ushered in a new dawn of hope and justice. Their unbreakable bond and their unwavering commitment to protecting the vulnerable would forever be a beacon in the renewed heart of Havenwood.